Oh, yeah. Welcome to the Sunday show after dark. I hope you guys are having an awesome time. I am here and it couldn't possibly be more excited. I remember when I saw the schedule, Erika and I finally get to do a Sunday show together. So welcome. How you doing?
Hey, I'm glad to be here. I'm doing great. There's a first time for everything. I'm glad we finally managed to get the schedule where we were actually on the same show, because I thought the same thing. I feel like we've been both doing that. Well, gosh, you've been doing it for way longer than me, but I was like, it's gonna happen one of these days where we're gonna end up on the same show. So I couldn't be happier to be here.
This is going to be exciting. So first of all, welcome everybody to the Sunday Show After Dark right here on the line. This show, just like the Sunday Show that started at 2 o'clock this afternoon, is primarily about people demonstrating or calling in to defend what they believe and why they believe it with respect to religious claims or the supernatural claims. But we are not limiting it to that. Erika is normally here for Skeptalk on Mondays. So anything that might be skepticism lately, if you've got some cryptid you want to talk about or whatever else. But I'd love, as always, theists are going to get priority. If you're a creationist, if you have problems with evolution, if you have some sort of anti-science position, by all means call in, because the more of you that do that, the less you have to listen to me, and the more I can sit here and listen to Eric school people in the nicest possible way. I'm going to stay in, as close to Zen mode as is ever possible for me. But it was really interesting. I saw a news thing from a couple of days ago. Now, I don't follow UFC anymore, although I've still got some DVDs from the old days. But Bryce Mitchell is the 12th ranked UFC fighter who's 29 years old and has just had a son. And he told everybody that he's going to be homeschooling his son so that he doesn't end up a communist, a Satan worshiper, or gay. He's also a flat earther who doesn't believe in gravity, and I guess challenged Joe Rogan to it's baffling to me. It's like, I don't know why anybody would challenge Joe Rogan to a debate on anything, but Erika, just for my confidence level, we are supremely confident that gravity's real, the earth doesn't exist. That much I got, but what are the odds that homeschooling is going to guarantee that your child doesn't end up gay?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there have been rigorous studies that I'm sure Bryce has read up on that back up that notion. And of course, the relationship between accepting gravity and being a communist is also very well supported. So he's doing the right thing if he wants to ensure all of those character qualities for his kid. But shoot, man, I mean, I don't know what's in the water right now, but when, we also had the issue with Terrence Howard, I believe it was, who went on Joe Rogan with his, did you see this, Matt? With Teriology? Talking about how
I barely heard a piece of it.
Yeah. I'm sure you saw it. 1 times 2 equals 3, right?
No, I wasn't completely up. What I was saying is that I saw a news story about Terrence, and I haven't seen anything from Terrence in years, but and I don't pay any attention to Joe Rogan. So just my news feed gets it on occasion. So Terrence Howard is saying that 1 times 2 equals 3.
He is, yeah. So he's actually saying that the fundamentals of mathematics, the ones that are responsible for every single piece of technology, from basic architecture that allows us to create an arch to the GPS and the cell phone that Terrence is using to post this nonsense on the internet, that all of that is foundationally flawed, because actually 1 times 2 does not equal 2, it equals 3. And he's published it was hilarious because he actually told Joe Rogan that he's published a paper on it. And my husband and I were sitting around drinking coffee the other day, and I was explaining the situation to him, and he was like, "Well, I kind of like to see this publication, No, it's not a publication. I figured it would be like a creationist publication, right? Where he publishes it in the Journal of Teriology or something like that. And at least you could call it a publication definitionally. But Nope, it was a series of Twitter screenshots that he uploaded to Twitter, and in it there is an entire paragraph that talks about how this revelation is only possible now because previously people have been misled by the sky people who came down and misled folks on the nature of multiplication tables, and it is their fault that we are in this quarry we are today. And I'm left wondering, what quarry? What's the problem? Everything seems to be working precisely as it should, but it ends with Terrence in all caps calling on the educators of the world to reinvestigate the foundations of mathematics. It's phenomenal stuff. And Joe Rogan had him on for, I don't know. I mean, Joe Rogan shows are pretty long, like 2 hours, 1.5, 2 hours, something like that. And I think Joe Rogan spoke for like 13 minutes. This guy just Joe gave him a platform to just go on and on and on.
That's
and
the
that's the
thing that
problem.
drives me away. I mean, first of all,
Yeah.
I'm on the record. People keep asking me, when am I going to go on Rogan? I'm like, he's never asked. And if he does ask, I don't know that I would actually go. I've virtually no respect for Joe Rogan. I don't consider him to be, I mean, he platforms people, but there's no challenge. There's no pushback because, and I think Joe's called himself an idiot before. I'm not going to try to necessarily label him, but if you have no expertise in any kind of area and no field of study, and you just really want to, fire up the bong and have somebody in to talk about weird stuff, cool. You can do that, but there's not going to be any probing questions. I had no idea that we learned math from the star people and they taught us wrong. How yeah, I really thought, when the ancient Greeks were sorting out stuff and building off of observations to give us the foundations of trigonometry and leading up to calculus when we finally get to Newton and others. I didn't know that we were getting all that from the star people, but I genuinely want to see the proof that 1 times 2 equals 3, because my first thought when I hear something like that is like, okay, is this a trick where we're not in base 10 anymore? Is there some different base we can use to go down that road?
So my husband and I, Anna, we were trying to figure this out ourselves as well. We were reading his Twitter post on it, and my understanding seems to be that the error is, it's not an issue of base 10, but it's something kind of analogous where he's already starting with 1, right? And then he's saying there's 1, and then there's 2 additional 1s to that, and that's why you get 3. So he's kind of imposing addition. Like I don't know. Like he's not taking into account that multiplication assumes that you're starting with, like, you're not starting with the number that's being multiplied, right? Like it's a very funky thing. I'm probably mischaracterizing it because to me it took me like 3 or 4 reads to even understand what he was trying to say, let alone what was actually written down. But I mean, you're absolutely right. Like with the Joe Rogan stuff, there's very little pushback, and honestly, the most pleased I've been with Joe Rogan has been, and I've spoken about it on Skeptalk before, but it's like when he had Tucker Carlson on, him pushing back on Tucker's denial of evolution was actually the most pushback I've seen from him in quite some time. So I was like, all right, there's at least one neuron bopping around there like a DVD screensaver trying to form a coherent thought. So we can hope.
I pointed out recently, Joe was a flat earther until Phil Plait went on. And kind of had a moon landing denier, not a flat earther. He was a moon landing denier. And Phil Plait, the bad astronomer, went on and kind of walked him through everything that we have and know and can demonstrate, right from reflectors that are left up there. I mean, we're at the point now where there are backyard telescopes. Granted, they're fairly expensive, but there are backyard telescopes that can see the things we've left on the moon. And for anybody to be saying, no, we've never been there, it's like, how did that shit get there if we didn't do it? I want to,
I was. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. No, I was going to say, like, to your point, right? Like I was seeing it. I was in the movie theater the other day. We were seeing the new Planet of the Apes movie, of course. And one of the previews for an upcoming movie was something, I think it was called Fly Me to the Moon, right? And one of the subplots of the movie, it's about the moon landing and the press leading up to the moon landing. And one of the subplots of the film is that they want to record a fake moon landing just in case the real moon landing doesn't happen. And I was like, man, that's a little irresponsible, actually, to kind of include in a movie, right? To even give lip service to that as a concept, that the moon landing was potentially faked. Because, like, as you said, we've got photographs from up there. It's very, very easy to prove that the moon landing happened. And I think one of the stats that I liked most about that is how many people would have to be involved in the cover-up if the moon landing was in fact hoaxed. I also saw in the side chat just a minute ago that it was actually 1 times 1 equals 2, not 1 times 2 equals 3. But for those of you correcting me, the same logic holds that I was presenting there. He starts by saying 1 times 1 equals 2. He's starting with 1 and then saying you're giving it an additional 1. That's why it equals 2 and not 1. Wow. So that holds for 1 times 2 equals 3 too. Same concept, same stupidity. Or ignorance. I'm not sure which one it is, because apparently he like started college, I believe. I'm not sure if he finished, but it's a mess out there, Matt.
There's some weird stuff that people can do with 1 times 1. Actually, there's lots of fun things that you can do in math. You can prove all sorts of things that aren't quite. But if that's what he's doing, I think somebody should just explain what it means to multiply something, because you're saying if you start with a unit and you're going to do that unit 1 time, then there's 1 of them.
Right.
If you do
I have 1 apple 1 time.
Yeah.
Precisely. I don't know. And I'm not sure if no one has like walked him through that, or if when you reach that level of stardom that he's in, that you just surround yourself by so many yes men that you quite literally are not exposed to people who are coming up to you and saying, oh, nah, dude, this is really basic stuff. If I have 1 apple 1 time, I have 1 apple, not 2 apples, right? It's that simple. But, what can you do?
It makes me wonder, and by the way, we've got callers lining up and we're going to jump to them almost right away. I just got one quick announcement to do after this question. I'm talking about a UFC fighter, one of the better ones, as far as competitively, thinks the earth is flat, doesn't believe in gravity, and is opting to homeschool. And already I would say, I'm not shocked that he thinks he's qualified to homeschool, but I worry if what counts as homeschooling is that. And when we're looking at what's available, people who didn't get good education, if you watch a video, even a joke video, I used to love like The Onion when it first came out. I live in Austin. They were actually working here. The Onion was based out of here, at least part of it was based out of here. And you could get like physical copies of The Onion, and we were just laughing and laughing and laughing. And now I can't stand any of the parody sites, because they can market clear as day all they want. Everybody's falling for it. I was at dinner, no offense to anybody else, because we're all going to fall for stuff, but I was at dinner recently with someone talking about Harrison Butker, I think, from the Chiefs, and they were saying, oh yeah, not only did people call him out for what he said, but the NFL fined him like $100,000 or something. And I was like, I don't agree with that, and I don't believe that it happened. And we went and looked up, and of course it hadn't happened. And yet we just run with it. We saw a headline. We're so busy. We don't have time to investigate anything, including what the hell multiplication is.
Well, the art of the Gish Gallop has gotten so much easier when you have access to so much just misinformation out there. I mean, you see it on Twitter all the time, where someone will post some AI generated art or something along those lines, and the time that it takes to go and suss out that that's in fact AI generated takes you way too long. Then I mean, it could disrupt your entire life if you devoted all your time to it. It's really phenomenal. And people are getting away with some pretty horrible stuff through that as well. Like a really mild example is you probably, I don't know if you saw this, but this guy, Forrest Valkai, has been claiming that he's got proof that the thylacine isn't extinct anymore. And he's doing this with all sorts of animals that are supposed to be extinct. And then he's got these pictures. He's like, oh, I was sent this photo by an anonymous viewer. And this kind of thing, I'm no expert with AI art, right? But even I can look at this kind of thing and be like, you could hop on DALL-E, you could hop on ChatGPT 4, and you could generate something pretty close to that. And indeed, people then went and did it. It doesn't even match basic anatomical proportions. And I think Forrest probably knows that. Dillahunty, not our beloved Forrest Valkai, of course. But I think he knows that. But golly, the views that it gets saying that you've secretly rediscovered this extinct animal, it just, people are willing to do anything for attention.
It was actually it touched on in a recent video from Clint from Clint's Reptiles,
Mm,
who I love his content. I'm baffled at his Mormonism,
that's awesome.
but he's genuinely
Is he
one of the
Mormon?
nicest. Yeah. We
Wow. Didn't know
let's talk about that later because we tried to
that.
talk to him about it, but we weren't going to actually like
Mm,
go down for a seminar.
mm.
It's an interesting little thing, but I know Clint touched on it because he does phylogeny stuff on the regular, and was pointing out that the thylacine may or may not be extinct, but it may also be um, unextinctable, which I think should be a word, even though I'm confident that it's not. But let me get the announcements out of the way. First of all, you guys are watching The Line, and this is the Sunday show after dark, and we're going to get to calls primarily about God related stuff, but it could be anything in the ballpark there. And Erika's here, ready to dig in on biology, evolution, science, God. You can't throw anything that Eric can't just like either say, "Oh yeah, I agree with that," or "Here's why you're wrong." Maybe we'll see. Um,
We'll see.
on Monday, Skeptalk's going to be Forrest Valkai and Jesse Jerdock. My apologies if I butchered Jesse's name. Tuesday, Chewed Gum is Alyssa and Arden. Wednesday, I'm going to be back with David Fitzgerald. We're going to try to do what failed on us a couple weeks ago. Thursday's Transatlantic Call-In show is going to be Arden and Josie. And next Sunday's Sunday show is going to be Seth and Paul. And the Sunday show after dark is going to be, look, we're going to have 3 of the Unholy Trinity on just for Sunday show because Aaron and I are doing the Sunday show after dark next Sunday. But if you're ready, we've got theist callers and everything if you're ready to dig in.
Oh, I'm ready. Let's get started.
Awesome possum. Max in Illinois, pronouns are he, him, as a theist who would like to provide an argument that God exists because anything at all. So Max, you are on with Erika and Matt. How are you?
Good. Hi, Erika. Hi, Matt. Salam alaikum. I used to watch your show a lot. I used to be an atheist up until a few years ago, actually. But so I'm not going to bother with these, stupid arguments that people usually throw around, like the Bible proving itself by itself. But
Max,
the reason
if
I
I
became a
could,
deist, which
yeah, that's what I was going to ask, Max, is you say you used to be an atheist. Cool. If I ever reach a point where I say I used to be an atheist, it'll be pretty easy for me to explain why I was an atheist and what changed my mind. So I'm looking forward to you explaining what changed your mind.
yeah. So a couple of years ago in college, I had this crazy trip, and I realized, while thinking about stuff, that the fact that like anything exists at all is kind of illogical because everything has to have like a cause for it, and similar to like if we go back far enough, everything is caused by something else. But logically, it's impossible for there to be a prime mover because why wouldn't that God thing not have a cause? And so that kind of made me realize that basically the fact that we exist, that there's like something rather than nothing, means that like it was created by something which is greater than us that we don't understand.
If we don't understand it, how can you reach the conclusion that it's a thinking agent that's greater than us? Like you're describing a process where everything needs a cause, so there must be some first cause. But how do you know that that first cause is an intelligent being that, in an act of creation, made us? Why not some other potential explanation? Because if it's something we don't know or don't understand, why couldn't it be a multiverse or 20 other things that we haven't even thought about and haven't proposed because we don't have an understanding and we can't investigate it? Why are those ruled out?
Well, simply because like if I say like trip and fall, it's because I hit my leg, my foot on something, and like that something has to exist. But when we when you think about it through the whole chain of events, I think in my mind you either come to the conclusion that there's like a recursion that goes on forever, or that there's something which is greater than us that put this thing into motion. I think those are the only two options.
That didn't really answer my question. Like, how did you rule out other options? Like you just said, if you think about it, you come down to one of two. I think there's potentially more and more that we haven't explored, but of the two, you've gone with one of them over the other. How did you rule the other one out?
Because, recursion is like impossible in my mind. We all know that 0.9999, etc. is just one. So it's like, at the end of the day, just mathematically speaking, it has to have like a certain
but the recursion doesn't exist as a recursion. It's just you are in a position where you are looking back upon things, and so you're trying to trace back. If our current space-time that we describe as the universe, if that which we can't go back, prior to its origin, and prior to its origin may be problematic, because if that's the origin of space-time, or at least the space-time we experience, then everything else becomes guesswork and speculation. How do you know that there's not like a meta space-time in a multiverse that is just bubbling up universes? I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just wondering how you ruled that out.
I think that because the next logical question to that would be, why does this multiverse space-time that you describe exist? Like, how does it come about? And then we run into the same problem, which is, why is there anything at all?
We don't know.
Yeah, Max, to me, this seems a little bit just like an argument from incredulity, which I think people rightly find unconvincing oftentimes. And I think the reason for that is because we've had a great many arguments from incredulity made across the history of scientific endeavors that have then come to become answered. So who is to say that we won't find an answer that is concrete? I'm not saying we will find an answer that's concrete. It might be something that's quite difficult for us to put into a lens that we can understand. Oftentimes, a lot of that relativity stuff is like that. But why? Like, I kind of agree with Matt here. Like, why are you appealing to an ultimate cause being like an entity, like an intelligent, entity or being? Why does it? What makes you sway towards that over ultimate recursion or some inanimate cause?
What do you mean, like inanimate cause, like the Big Bang? But then the question is again, what led to the Big Bang, for example?
Could you not just do that with a deity as well, though?
Yeah, of course. But what gave the cause to a deity, right? Like, I'm not like talking from like a Christian or like Islamic standpoint, but
for sure.
Why?
But to me, it seems like ultimate recursion both ways. Like, no matter which way you cut it, you're ultimately you're going to end up with turtles all the way down. From the lens that you're looking at it from here, like, oh well, what caused the Big Bang? Well, what created the causing deity, right? I don't see why your solution here solves the problem.
Yeah, and I think there's another problem here, Max, if I can. If you're getting back to the origin of this universe, and you're essentially saying, hey, if we look at the origin of this universe, either there's some natural explanation that we don't know, or some intelligent being did it. Okay, cool. I don't know how to tell which of those is more probable. And I don't know how to rule out various things like a multiverse. And when I brought that up, your response was, but this just shifts the problem back a little further. If in fact there is a multiverse creating universes, then now you have to ask what created that multiverse. And so under that, you can still say, we're going to say that the multiverse was created by a god. Here's the problem. If it's true that the multiverse exists, then you are wrong in reaching the conclusion that a god directly created this universe. At most, you could only be right that the god created the multiverse, or whatever's beyond that, or whatever's beyond that, or whatever the explanation is. And so if you're going to acknowledge that positing a multiverse as a potential explanation just shifts the problem back one, then what you're acknowledging is you don't have any grounds at all to choose an intelligent agent for the origin of this universe. And when somebody proposes an alternate thing, you just move your God back. It's completely God of the gaps. At whatever point we can't explore earlier than the Planck time right now, and maybe ever. And we don't have time machines and we can't do a rewind. So the best we can do is hypothetical alternate universes or universal models. Our Big Bang cosmology could be wrong. We could be wrong about dark matter, dark energy, any number of things. But what's going to fix that is actual science and data, and not, well, I couldn't think of anything other than this. At some point in there's a God. I'm just going to go ahead and say there's a God at the beginning of our universe instead of at the multiverse. But logically, you have no more grounds for picking God as the start of this universe versus God as the start of the multiverse versus the God as the start of whatever. And so it seems that it doesn't just shift the problem back. It seems that as we learn more, you just keep shifting where you're going to insert God. And I don't mean you specifically, although that's what your argument does.
Right. And I get your arguments, Matt, and it makes a lot of sense. But to my point of view, like we keep, as you say, keep finding the answers to these questions. There's always going to be something that caused that other thing. So is it even possible to, find? Well, I mean, do you think the Big Bang just, happens, or like
what caused God?
Yeah, that would be my question as well.
Why God?
No, I said what caused God? You asserted that everything is going to have a cause. So what's God's cause?
Well, that's the crux of the problem. It's the same thing. You can remove God, you can say Big Bang. But what created the Big Bang? What created the creation of the Big Bang?
The answer is we don't know.
Yeah, Max. To me, that's directly analogous. You're picking one over the other here, but they are in fact equivalent. If we don't know what caused the Big Bang right now, and you don't know what caused God to exist in the first place, why should anybody pick your perspective over ours here? What should sway them to your side? What do you have that we don't here?
Well, I mean, what would sway me is like evidence, but there is no evidence for what was before. Like I'm saying, like, isn't it impossible to find enough evidence? Because as you say, once you figure out the cause for something, you have to figure out a cause for the cause. You know what I'm saying?
So, but you're saying that you don't want to do the work to find the cause of the cause. So you're just going to accept some proposition that you can't demonstrate, that you can't have evidence for. Why? Why not just say, I don't know?
Well, I mean, I'm not really saying that because, obviously, well, I agree. I think that the Big Bang Theory seems like credible, but, we can keep inventing or finding out, theories for justification for the cause of this thing, but then like it kind of goes on forever, right? And at some point you have to.
No, we don't. We don't know whether it goes on forever. What if we tomorrow develop a model of the origin of the universe that actually serves as an explanation to say, here's what most probably happened. And there's not necessarily an infinite regress. What there may be is the universe always existed in some state, maybe separate from space and time, and it expanded in space and time because we don't have an understanding of it. To me, when somebody says, hey, the universe must have some explanation, I agree. The universe must have some explanation. That's my understanding. What are the potential candidate explanations for the origin of the universe? God isn't even a candidate explanation until you demonstrate that there is a God who can do this. And so you're going and accepting an answer, which I don't even see how you determined it's a candidate other than I can't think of anything else. And somebody said this is possible. I don't even know if a God's possible.
So if I may, I feel maybe, Max, what you were kind of getting at there was that if from a naturalistic perspective, you're kind of arguing that if we're proposing there's a naturalistic origin or like a materialistic origin, for lack of a better term, that there is a definitive, easy to understand answer, whereas with God, it might be incomprehensible and not investigatable by science. And, to me, if that's the case, what I'm hearing is that given the choice between we might find the answer someday, perhaps even tomorrow, or the answer is not possible to discover at all, you've chosen the latter. And I'm curious as to why that's compelling to you. Like, why would you choose we can't know over we might know?
Well, I don't think that it's I don't think it's that this answer is possible to find in a sense, because like you always have to keep going back and justifying like the reason for it. And I disagree that there is, as you say, this answer as to how this whole existence came to be, because there has to be like a start somewhere, but the fact that there is a start kind of says that what was before, right? We always keep going back and asking that.
Max, not only do we not necessarily agree that there has to be a start in that sense, a second ago you said that the answer is not possible to find. Erika and
Right.
I think, are saying we don't know what the answer is, but you're saying you've settled on what the answer is. How can you simultaneously believe the answer is not possible to find and then say, but I think it's a God?
Well, because if something is impossible, then it has to be God. Like, it's kind of the definition.
No. You said it's not possible to find the answer. You didn't say that the answer itself was categorically impossible. But are you saying that God is impossible?
Sort of. I mean, I don't. This is like semantics. I guess I would agree with that.
It's not semantics. Is it possible that a God exists? And how do you know whether or not that's true?
Well, I mean, we don't know. But even if something exists, what is the reason for its existence?
But my answer is I don't know. Your answer is because God. And I'm just trying to point out that I don't see what the justification is for yours. And you haven't offered anything other than you don't seem to be able to, you don't seem to be willing to say you don't know. And you don't seem to be able to say, I've ruled out these other explanations via method A.
So to that point, Max, if I may, like suppose let me put this like in an analogy, right? Like suppose you and Matt and I walk into a room and the room is like an Airbnb we're renting and it's just absolutely destroyed. And we all look around at the destroyed room, which we left in perfect harmony. And Matt and I look at it and we're like, oh my God, what happened here? We have no idea. And then you say, well, I think a clown from the local circus came in here, broke in, and made a mess of the place. Who do you think has like the burden here to support their idea? The people who are saying they don't know, or the person who's saying I actually feel very certain that it is this thing that to the other two people who are in the room seems quite implausible because there's not even any support for a circus being in town where we're all currently staying. So do you see where Matt and I are coming from here, where we're saying like, okay, you're supposing that you know what the cause is and that the cause is God, whereas we're saying we're not sure. I don't think it's unreasonable for us to ask why you feel that way and to provide some actual support, whatever that support may be. What is convincing to you about that, as opposed to just saying, I don't know, we'll see, we're working on it?
To me, the answer to that question is that because like stuff exists now, because I'm talking on the phone, on the internet, then that means that there was a cause, something that created it. And when you go far enough, like it just logically seems to me that, there's no explanation to this, because
So,
any
Max,
explanation would need to have.
Max, do you understand that when you say it just seems like, you're not actually providing any explanation? You're only just restating that you're convinced. So let me skip this. If you don't have, or if you can't give a reason that's going to compel us to be convinced that a God exists, you're now in a position.
I mean, you're atheist. You're already going to be convinced he doesn't.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, if you're an atheist, you're already going to be convinced that he doesn't. So anything I provide.
No, Max. Atheism is not the state of being convinced that gods don't exist. It is the state of not being convinced that gods do exist. There may be a God out there that I don't know about, but nobody's demonstrated that it's real or possible. But let me ask this. if you're now in a position where you think the best explanation for why there's something rather than nothing is that an intelligent God created it all, what does that belief do for you? What does it explain? What benefit is there? And what do you know about this God character?
Well, the benefit is like organized religion in terms of, mobilizing like resources, uniting people for like a certain cause. And
so
that's
my
really,
view is that organized religion is not the benefit that people suspect, but isn't it possible that there could be a God agent creator of the universe that is not one of the ones worshipped by religion or religions?
yeah, of course. It could
Okay.
be like some ancient
So
God that
then
we
your
forgot about.
answer of what do you get out of this when you say organized religion, that's not true. You don't get organized religion necessarily out of whatever God it is that you think created the universe. So what can you tell me any characteristics of that being? What does it think? What does it want? Does it care who I have sex with?
I don't think it does. In my opinion, God just created the universe and then it kind of went off from there. And, the planets formed scientifically and like evolution made us here scientifically. And, he kind of just like,
So the God
created
you're
matter and then,
advocating for just kicked it all off and then doesn't interact with it in any way that's detectable. How do you know that?
because stuff exists and that has to be an explanation why. Because
It has to be?
it's
How did you determine that it
it's
has to be? We went from you prefer it because you're not willing to say I don't know. How on earth you have a God that you have literally no characteristics for that according to you think has done nothing after creating everything. And then you're saying it has to be the case that this being created everything. I've never been
logically, because
logically
the chain
logically my ass. What is the logical argument that give me the syllogism and the premises that lead to the conclusion, therefore a creator God must exist? What does that syllogism look like?
Okay. I'll give you the argument now.
Cool.
I exist. I was created by my parents. They were created by their parents, and then in this chain, they were created by, I don't know, evolution, like cells, protokaryotes, whatever. And if you go far enough, it has to be. There's no stoppage, right? You can say
Okay,
at the very end.
Max, I'm going to stop you because you're not presenting a syllogism at all. A syllogism has premises with major and minor premises that are connected by connecting terms. And there can be nothing in the conclusion that doesn't exist in those premises. You started with, you exist. I agree, you exist. Then you said you were created by your parents. I think that's a weird way to use created, but I would agree that the explanation is your parents had sex. And yes, we can trace that back to the origins of life, which we don't necessarily understand. And then you just say, if you keep going back, it must be a God. I'm asking for a syllogism that demonstrates with premises that it must in fact be a God. And you like that wasn't even the ballpark of a syllogism.
Well, I don't know what a syllogism is. I don't know what the definition.
You should probably look into that.
Like an argument. Well,
it is.
You're using these big words to make me look like a fool.
I'm sorry, what?
You're using these like big words to like intellectually like assault me because obviously I'm not like.
So now I've
like
sat here and repeatedly asked questions, and because I asked about something that you didn't know, you're now accusing me of assaulting you intellectually to make you look foolish. I will stop talking now, and you and maybe Erika won't make you look foolish, but I guarantee you I'm not the one doing that.
So Max, I get, if syllogism and stuff like that, maybe if you're not coming from, you've not done like a philosophy class or whatever, didn't take it, like that's totally fine. But I think maybe then the response should have been when Matt asked for that, say, okay, these aren't terms that I'm familiar with. Can you explain them? And I think Matt would have been happy to walk you through it, or just either say, okay, maybe just explain it, to however you feel comfortable, and then we could have moved forward with that. But to me, kind of listening for a minute here, I struggle to see why a god here is parsable from just a force or a phenomenon that we don't understand. Like, why are you ascribing like godlike characteristics to it rather than just saying, okay, well, maybe what kicks everything off, if that is indeed the nature of the universe, and we're not dealing with like a big bang, big crunch, eternal recursion there. I'm struggling to understand why still at this point in the conversation, and it almost seems more confusing to me now than it did initially, because I don't see how your version of God is any different from what Matt and I are proposing here, which is it's something that we don't understand yet. It's a phenomenon that we're seeking to understand better. And your version of this is it's a God, and they are not understandable, and they also impact our lives exactly zero. It is just an initiating force that kicks everything off. Could you please explain to me how that is, like, what makes that a god versus just a characteristic of the universe that we don't understand? Why can't we investigate it?
Because, well, okay, I'm just trying to understand. What you said is like, I agree with that, God is just a placeholder for something that's impossible to know, because, this causality, if it keeps going forever, that's like, it makes no sense, right? So, I'm not like advocating for any like particular God, of the Bible or the Quran, but we have to have like some placeholder that will,
why
be
a God
like
at all? Why a God at all? Why not a force that we don't understand that we're currently trying to investigate using things like the James Webb Space Telescope or something? Why a God? What about that term? What about that idea do you find appealing conceptually and logically that cannot be met by what Matt and I have proposed here, which is that we're working on it?
I mean, in theory, I think it can be the same as you say. Like, there is like objective reasons, like, charity, like, like the benefits of organized religion. That it's better, because if we both say, I generally agree that if we say something that we don't know, but if we say it's a God, then we can use that to like promote, Christian values, being pro-life, being pro-humanitarian stuff, much more.
Well,
It
now
will have like a better
really
impact.
That's really interesting to me, because I would propose that looking at the world today, that despite the fact that they're much smaller, there are humanitarian organizations that are entirely secular that are doing. How do you square that? How do you square, and I'll sort of tack this on at the end, how do you square the fact that from an anthropological perspective, we've seen groups of people that have lived in and been observed and been documented that don't have religion? How have these people survived and thrived? To that end, how have other animals, right, who completely have no concept of religion, no concept of God, and yet have been existing and thriving on this planet for, in some cases, tens of millions of years in relative stasis?
Well, to that, it's, we are the most numerous species, like, on the planet, because
we aren't.
We
objectively are not.
Well, in
there
the
are many
sense
more.
that, like, we're everywhere.
We're outnumbered by many different species of arthropods.
Yeah,
and I'm pretty sure
we're the ones who control the world, and the religion has an important part to play in it.
Do we control the world?
Well, I mean, we farm chickens. We create like cow ranches. Like, we're the reason why there's so many cows in the first place, because we eat them. So, and like,
ants farm fungus, and they decimate entire ecosystems on their own. They're quite influential. They're far more numerous than humans. They build citadels and cities that have specific locations that are for specific tasks. They meet many criteria for, not all, because they're ants, and we like to sort of bring them down because of that. But they're quite sophisticated animals. We see other organisms that are even
going away from. I feel like we're going away from the important part.
I agree. I agree, but the point that I'm trying to make here is that success on this planet I would argue, if you're looking at it at an organism, at a species level, success has very little to do, if anything at all. I mean, I think that would be quite a stretch, with having religion. Many organisms have existed on this planet and been far more successful than us, and they never once had a single thought about religion pass through their minds. So my question is, like the era of the Mesozoic, the entire Mesozoic, you had dinosaurs rule the earth. Many species were incredibly long-lived, never once had a religious thought in their mind. If you want a more contemporaneous example, Homo erectus was around for 2 million years, and we have absolutely no evidence for religion from them. Almost analogously to how humans...
But none of them ever went into space. None of them have built like spaceships and planes and, transport nature to suit their needs.
Is that how you define success? Because I would define success as the number of species on the planet and or how long they've been here. Because we're on a fast track to extinction here. We've only been here 300,000 years. We've only been industrial for, I don't know, less than 300.
I'm also confused at how you can have a God that creates everything and then does nothing else and say that's a foundation for a religion and religion is important and we've gone to space. What religion sent us to space and how did it do that?
So for the first question, I think it's irrelevant which religion it is. It's just that it's a natural justification, explanation why it seems that, why the world exists. And,
so
it could be Islam, it could be...
If I may here, Max...
So you don't care about what's true?
I mean, I'm a deist. I think God created the world and then he went away, didn't do anything else. And, whichever religion is more effective...
But there's no deist religion because there are no properties and no interactions with a deistic God. Deists are claiming to have discovered a God that's undiscoverable.
I'm not sure what that means.
It means if God doesn't interact with reality in any detectable way, then claiming to detect the undetectable is irrational. But let's say we made up a God. Are you saying that it's okay to make up religions about gods that aren't the deistic God you believe in, and those are fine?
Yeah. I think
okay, cool. Then in that case, the God you believe in is useless and irrelevant because I can make up any religion about any God, and that's going to be more useful than the God that you're proposing. Now, answer my other question about which religion took us to space and how.
Well, I believe it was our Christian religion and Protestantism, especially because of the Protestant work ethic. Our shared Judeo-Christian values.
Are you suggesting that there weren't plenty of non-Protestants who have a good work ethic and who participated in getting us to the moon?
Of course, there were. I'm just saying.
Then you don't get to credit it with the Protestants. When I say which religion took us to the moon and how, the very notion that you come back with, well, Protestant work ethic. How dare you suggest that all of those, like Carl Sagan and others, didn't have a decent work ethic? And so when I ask you, of course they had a work ethic. Of course they helped get us to moon. And so now we've established that people who are Protestant may or may not have a good work ethic, and people with a good work ethic may or may not be Protestant, and people with a good work ethic may or may not have contributing to get us to the moon. So you have a bunch of useless assertions, none of which demonstrate which religion got us to the moon or how.
And if I may, Max, I'm saying the journey to the moon is directly antithetical to the ideology that you're proposing here, right? Like when we first proposed the moon project, like going to the moon and the space race in general, there were a great many people who were like, no, that's not doable. You can't actually do that. That's not something within the grasp of humanity. And it was the people who said, no, this is something that if we investigate, we can actually go forward and accomplish it, that made it happen. And that's directly antithetical to what you're proposing about investigating the origin of the universe. Right? You're the person who would have prevented the space race from going down. You would have been the guy who was like, nah, sorry, it's not doable. We can't make it happen. We don't understand how to get ourselves to space now. Therefore, we will never understand it. It's not understandable.
And it's weird that the same religion, it's weird that the same religion that imprisoned Galileo for daring to suggest that the Earth wasn't the center of the universe is the one that you think took us to space.
I do think Catholicism took us to space, and maybe my words were taken out of context. America.
Yeah, because you said Protestant. It's not out of context for me to hear Protestant when you say fucking Protestant. But now you switched to Catholic. Okay, what about the Catholic religion
I did switch to
got
Catholic.
us to the moon?
No.
Excuse me?
I'm saying I didn't switch to Catholic. I said that it's the Protestant work ethic and the Judeo-Christian values that our founders have,
You
based the
just
whole
said
Constitution
Catholic.
on.
You literally just said Catholic.
Okay, well, in that case, that's not what I meant. I meant that our Protestants.
Here, why don't we stick a pin in this, and you go off and think about what you meant, and you call back in. That way, there's no chance that I'm bullying you by giving too many questions, and you can call in and explain which religion sent us to the moon, how they did it, how you know they did it, and why doesn't matter whether or not that religion is true. But let's save it for another time because I've got other theistic callers. Sorry, what?
The founding fathers were deists, and
some of them were deists. The greatest nation. Some of the founding fathers were deists. Some of them weren't. Why is the religious view of the founding fathers relevant at all to how we got to the moon? Do you know that they also kept slaves?
Well, it was normal in
Do you know that they also kept slaves?
Yeah, of course.
Why don't you bring that up? Why don't you bring that up and say that it's slavery that got us to the moon?
Because we abolished it in 1865.
Because you're cherry picking. I don't think that's why. It's because you're cherry picking. You should look that up while you're looking up syllogisms. I'm gonna move on to another caller now, but thanks, Max.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, Max.
Appreciate the call. And as a reminder, this and all the shows on the Line Network are caller-driven call-in shows. We're happy to hear what you believe and why, but by the time we get to a certain point where we're probably just running in circles and retreading the same thing over and over, it's better to stick a pin in it, go off and think, come back with something else, because there's also other people waiting, and I don't want to be rude to them any more than necessary. So John in California is a scientist and engineer who's developed a belief in God, wants to know what we think about it. So John, welcome. You're on with Erika and Matt.
Hey, happy Sunday. How are you?
I'm all right.
Doing okay?
Yeah, sorry. Just I had the phone down. I wasn't expecting to be on.
I get it.
So I wanted to tell you guys a little story. I grew up in a Catholic household and went to Catholic schools all during my upbringing. And, I was religious as a child, but when I was in my teenage years, I rejected it and I became an atheist. I ended up going to a state university, which obviously is a totally secular institution. And I studied engineering there. And I went through some experiences as an atheist that caused me to be open to a spiritual point of view and to accept God. And the most easily relatable of those is that I started to find four-leaf clovers in a pattern that I would call statistically anomalous. And I now have a wallet with like over 100 of them. And I haven't looked for them. And so that seemed to be kind of what a religious person might call a sign. And so I haven't joined a church or anything, but I'm just open to a spiritual point of view. And I find that when I'm open to what feels like God in my life, when I explore that, even if I take a scientific approach to exploring it, it leads to positive results.
So,
and I haven't really discussed this with anyone. Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking about what you perceive to be the statistical likelihood of four-leaf clovers. What are the odds of finding a 4-leaf clover if you just had to guess?
Well, I've Googled it, and it usually comes up as around 1 in 10,000 clovers is a 4-leaf clover.
A 2017 study said it's a little closer to 1 in 5,000, but sure, 1 in 5,000 to 1 in 10,000. How many bits of clover do you think you've seen versus how many 4-leaf clovers you've had? You've beaten those odds by how much?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. The thing that makes this meaningful to me is that I haven't actually looked for these. It's just kind of, I'll glance down and see one there.
Okay.
And so I started to collect them. And
I don't know. Maybe Erika knows. If you live in a particular area, the clover that you're likely to run into could be just genetically predisposed to producing more 4-leaf clovers, right?
Yep.
But,
So it could be drift, right? Like you could have that, but then it also could be that for whatever reason in the area you live in, there's some kind of selective benefit to having 4 leaves, right? Like you don't know that perhaps, I would just to throw my hat in the ring on this one, right? Like it could very well be possible that the area that you live in is very predisposed to 4-leaf clovers. I don't even think you need to appeal to that, right? I think that this is nothing more than like an attention survivorship bias, right? There's a word for it that's just not coming to my mind right now, right? When I was a kid, I saw that I would look up at the clock when I was trying to fall asleep when I was in like elementary school. And one day I looked at it and it said 9/11, right? And it was pretty close to when 9/11 had actually happened. I thought, oh man, what a horrible sign, right? That's awful. That's really bad luck. And then it seemed that for the next like 5 years of my life, every time I looked at the clock in the evening, it was 9/11. I don't think that was actually what was going on, right? I think that what was actually going on
420 all the time.
Yeah, see, yours is more fun than mine. But like, what was actually going on is that 420 and 9/11 are very memorable numbers that show up on clocks. And so when you see them, they stick in your head and you're like, God, how many times? You don't think to yourself, when was the last time I saw 8:52 on the clock? Because that number doesn't mean anything. At least to me, it doesn't mean anything, right? A 4-leaf clover is something that is widely appreciated to symbolize luck, right? It's widely appreciated in cultures here in the West to be related to things like good fortune. And so I don't think it's surprising that after the first clover you found, you were like, oh my God, a 4-leaf clover, what good luck. And then every time you saw a 4-leaf clover since then, you were like, holy crap, these are so many 4-leaf clovers. To me, without the actual numbers of like, and I know that you don't have those on hand, and that sucks because I would actually be very interested in like how much are you beating these odds by here, right? But if I had to bet, I would bet that you're seeing a lot more clovers than the ones that you're picking up. And the fact that you're picking up all these 4-leaf clovers is nothing more than the fact that 4-leaf clovers are very memorable and you take them or you appreciate them every time you see them. And it sort of created a very clear pattern in your mind because humans are perhaps the best, if not the best current pattern seekers on the planet. We see them wherever we go. We see them in wood grain. We see them in the clouds, right?
I want to make sure I give John a chance to respond, but the point that I was eventually going to get to is this. John, if I gave you the max benefit of the doubt and you happen to find a 4-leaf clover literally every time you left the house, it didn't matter where you were going, at some point for every day for 365 days, at some point in every one of those days, you weren't out searching clover for 4-leaves, but every one of those days, 365 days in a row, you found a 4-leaf clover somewhere. What would be the best explanation for that? And how do you know that's the best explanation? Because to me, that doesn't get me to God or even in the ballpark.
Sure. Yeah. No, well, this is more like an experiential change for me. I think that a couple of the ideas that in my experience, personality development, that I tie into this and I use to inform how my perspective has changed, and I remain a rational person, are the Greek concept of logos, that there's like an organizing principle to the universe. And the other one is Jung's synchronicity, which I think is more directly relevant. That I think that if I was going to categorize this phenomenon in, spiritual sphere of things, I would say it has strong, synchronistic qualities to it. That they're all this evokes an emotion that reminds me of the comfortable church community atmosphere where I grew up when I find a clover. So the explanation to me is like it's like a SETI, kind of like, oh, we got a beep, that kind of a thing. Like there may be something out there, and so in life I explore that. It's I was a very just really turned off, closed-minded atheist for a long time, and so I just wanted to share like the benefit of being open to where I find these signals that seem to be, meaningful in my life, wouldn't be meaningful to others. I'm not really pushing this, I don't expect you guys to change your point of view, but I just wanted to share it and discuss it because I don't really talk about this with many people.
Do you think that Erika or myself are opposed to the possibility of a God?
No, I don't think so. I haven't heard Erika on this show. I've heard you, Matt, a little bit. And the last caller, it sounded like you were open-minded to some of this, but this particular one, and here's another thing that kind of goes to this is I've talked to people that I grew up with in the same area who were beating the same streets, and they haven't found four-leaf clovers. Not to say that this is like special or anything, because obviously there's always a perfectly rational, secular explanation for it, that it's just chance. But for me, it has made my life better just to be open to the possibility that there is a greater, deeper spiritual meaning to it.
I don't think that there's particularly, I'm sorry for cutting you off there, Matt, but I don't think that there's particularly anything wrong. I mean, like Matt just said there, like we're both, I would consider myself, I won't speak for you, Matt, although I think this holds for you as well. I'm perfectly open to the possibility of a whole lot of things in my life. And I find that being open to these kinds of realities and being open to being convinced to them, of them rather, it enriches my life greatly, right? It's a part of being a curious person. I don't think that's a negative on your part at all. But I remain unconvinced, and I think the reason for that is because, you keep an open mind, you keep an open curiosity, but you also try to keep a level head with this. And I think if you're getting a lot out of seeing these four-leaf clovers, that's cool. I think coming to the conclusion that you've come to on my end, I don't find that convincing. Now, if you've got some reason that you find this prevalency of four-leaf clover specifically to be compelling, I would be interested in hearing that. But you say other people aren't seeing them. I would wager, my granddad does a lot of carpentry. He's like really into carpentry and stuff like that. And when I visit his house, I look at the wood that he's got out. And a lot of times I see, like Sid the Sloth from Ice Age in the wood grain. And the reason is because that guy's got a face that's like two eyes and then a nose in the center. It's a really common pattern to see in wood grain. But someone who's never seen Ice Age isn't going to see Sid the Sloth in wood grain. They're not looking for that pattern. I think you're looking for this pattern. That's where I'm coming from on this. When I hear you say this, I hear you saying, when I see these four-leaf clovers, I get positive reinforcement. I feel great when I see these four-leaf clovers. I think you're looking for them. And I don't think, again, like that's not a bad thing. I just don't think that the conclusion that you're coming to is necessarily convincing to me.
I want to make sure you answer, and I'll have more to say afterwards, but also I just realized I don't remember the last time I found any clover, let alone a four-leaf clover. I know there's clover and different clover-like plants all over. And I even have people, whose ground cover, their grass has been replaced by others. I just don't ever bend down and pick them up at all. But I want to let you respond first, John, before I go into the next point.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, if you don't believe that this just occurs and that I'm not looking for them, I don't want to argue about that. but if I had to kind of make an interpretation, I mean, if it was me on the other end of the cosmic ball and chain here, and I was the one sending these signals, this would be merely, I think, an eye-opening thing to kind of get somebody's attention, and and really from there, I kind of said, okay, right, well, what if I just stop reacting to this particular phenomenon and just look for the same experiential qualities as I go about regular choices in life, and just think about, where do I see God in life now that I'm open to this, and will that help me make decisions that I can more easily live with? And it does. It helps me find comfort and peace, and it helps me form the relationships that I want to have.
That's all good stuff, except that it annoys the crap out of me because I don't understand any of it. I don't know what you mean by spiritual. I don't know. You said something like, if I had to come up with an explanation, and I immediately said, do you have to? Wouldn't I don't know why this is happening make more sense? And then you mentioned, if you were on the other side of the cosmic ball and chain, if you were God, would you be making you or me or anybody else find four-leaf clovers at a slightly or greatly elevated rate as a way of sending a message to us?
I don't know. I make no claim to understand God, or
I asked what
whether
John,
it's
I asked
sentient.
what you would do if you were God. I didn't say, what do you think God's doing?
Oh,
if you were
right.
God,
Okay. Well, yeah. I
if
mean,
you were God, would you send an increased picking up of four-leaf clovers as a message?
it depends on, is this whatsoever meaningful to the person finding them?
If you don't mind
Would
me
it-
asking, John, I really don't feel like obligated to answer this if this is prying, but is there something about four-leaf clovers for you in particular, outside of just like, oh, you saw them and you were like, that's really lucky? Like, do they have some kind of significance to you in your life outside of just like what they would be to like me or Matt here?
Oh, yeah. Yep. My family is half Irish, and went to a church called St. Patrick's, which has the clover. There's the story of the clover. Whether it's true or not, I don't know.
So do you think that I was going to make an example with the church that I went to growing up, but like, let's say, like, do you think that if God is out there communicating with people, and like someone went to, like, let's say I went to a church called like the Rising Dragon Church, like, do you think I would start seeing like dragons not literal dragons, but like, depictions of dragons everywhere? Like, do you not think that maybe what's going on here is that because a clover means a lot to you, when you're passing over a clover patch, you look at the clovers. Clover means something to you historically. It's been something of comfort to you. So you look at it, like, it draws your eye more than like a dandelion would. If you went to the Church of the Dandelion, I think you would probably be looking at dandelions more than you would be at clovers. Like, I guess what I'm asking here, to kind of formulate it into something more coherent, is what about this situation that you've experienced makes it more likely, in your opinion, to be supernatural rather than four-leaf clovers mean something to you, thus you pay attention to them, thus you look for four-leaf clovers more often, thus you find four-leaf clovers more often? Why isn't that a reasonable explanation to you?
Well, it could be that it seems like this is kind of like a two sides of the coin thing. Like, I've been on the side where I try to make other people's testimonies about their experiences with finding spirituality secular. But having been later, I went through that atheist period, but after having changed myself, I realized it's more about what happened during the experience, like what was going through my mind during this experience.
So, John, I want to make it clear, like, I'm not trying to, my goal here isn't to like poke holes in your experience to like denigrate it or something like that. But just since you called in to like talk to a couple of skeptics, I think what Matt and I are both trying to do here is to say, okay, well, like, what about this situation from your perspective makes it necessary to you that it's supernatural, right? Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from you here. There are people in my life who have had weird experiences. Like I've got family members who I trust very greatly. I think they've got a level head on their shoulders. Like weird things, they talk about these weird things that have happened, like ghosts or something like that. Do I think that makes them, crazy, or that they saw a ghost? I don't think either of those things are true. I think that they can be a reasonable person and have had this experience, and that there's also potentially just like a pretty regular explanation for it. So I'm proposing it mostly to kind of say, okay, well, have you considered this? And if you have, why didn't you find it compelling?
I think it was, I think about it. I haven't done the numbers, to be honest with you, on the likelihood of this happening, but merely anecdotally, the numbers don't seem to me to add up. That people that I grew up with, who went to the same church, lived in the same neighborhood, didn't find them. The sheer number that I had found, in a concentrated period of my life, seemed bizarre. That I wasn't looking for them. I would just glance, and there'd be one right there that I focused on as soon as I glanced down. And then it's the experience that I attach to it. It's more than just, I get that warm, fuzzy feeling, really. And then pursuing, the same phenomenon, like I said, quasi-scientifically, when I just
this isn't scientific.
Please excuse.
You just acknowledge you haven't done the data. It's all on feel. You haven't run the numbers. That don't pretend that it's scientific, because instead of having an atheist phase, I wish you would have had a skeptic phase, because what you're talking about here is absolutely a bucket load of bias, and without considering the reality of the world that it creates. So, for example, have you ever been incredibly desperate and begged God for a sign?
No.
Okay. Do you think there are people who have been desperate and begged God for a sign? The right God?
Yeah.
Do you think that they all got a sign?
Well, every single one of them, no, but I think that probably what you're saying is that somebody who was looking for a sign is going to assign meaning to something that's there.
John, stop. Instead of telling me what you think I'm looking for, just let me fucking finish.
Oh, no. Okay.
If not all of these people who in desperation sought a sign from God, that means there are people out there who were desperately seeking a sign from God, who needed it for something important and did not get it. Why would God give you more four-leaf clovers instead of giving them a sign?
I don't know.
I don't either. But since you don't know that God's sending you signs, you haven't run the data. Even if you run the data, even if you found out that you are the most anomalous four-leaf clover collector in the history of the whole world, that wouldn't demonstrate that it's a God sending you a sign. You need to come up with a methodology to demonstrate that the conclusion you prefer is actually the one that is supported by the data. And you don't get to do that by cherry picking how often you find a four-leaf clover while ignoring starving people, children dying of cancer, and their parents desperately flailing around for a God to try to do something. You don't get to just narrow it down to, this is kind of weird, because the reality is, even if you're not trolling, even if you found four-leaf clovers left and right, even if you found them at a greater rate than anybody in the history of the world, nothing about that would demonstrate a God, or that a God's trying to send you a message. And you deriving comfort from it is entirely about you and what you derive comfort from, because there's no demonstration that a God's trying to provide you comfort at all.
So if I may kind of tag something onto this, I was just looking at chat, just looking over there to see what was going on, and I saw at least one person who said that they just looked at the clock and it said 9:11, and I think that's perfectly telling for this conversation that we're having here, right? Because they wouldn't have typed it, they wouldn't have noted that if we hadn't had this conversation, if they hadn't been looking for it. if that hadn't had lit something up in their brain, in the pattern seeking part of their brain, where they're like, oh, that's so weird. We were just talking about that number and now I've seen it. To me, that's a perfect example, right? Exemplary of what I at least think is going on with your four-leaf clovers. Statistically, someone out there is finding more four-leaf clovers or found more four-leaf clovers than anybody on Earth. And I would wager that it's far above the statistical average, right? It doesn't mean that that person is communing with God. And at the same time, like in this situation, and again, like I'm not trying to take away the feelings that you're getting from this. Like you want to interpret that as a spiritual connection, sure, by all means, but I don't find it convincing for that exact reason, for the 9/11 reason that we just saw take place here in chat, which is when you're looking for something, when you're looking for a sign, you see them everywhere.
Still here, yeah. Okay. All right.
John, do you have?
Well, I have nothing to argue. I just wanted to share this and see what you guys thought about it.
Okay. Well, what I think is, if you're deriving pleasure from anything you're doing and it's not hurting anybody, I probably don't have much of an objection personally, although I do have an objection to believing things without good reason, because I don't believe that the beliefs themselves, nor the heuristics used to arrive at those beliefs, live in a vacuum. I think if you can convince yourself that your prevalence at picking up four-leaf clovers is somehow a message from God, what's to stop you from using that same heuristic to then find all sorts of other things as messages from God? And without going into a clear, slippery slope fallacy, the fact is, the heuristic that we use to reach one conclusion is one we use to reach others. And so I'd rather not only do I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible, I'd rather not believe anything for bad reason, because that reason is going to get used for something else. And so while I'm happy that you seem to be finding value in it, I have no idea what you mean by spiritual. I have no idea what anybody means by spiritual. And I care about whether or not something's true. So if I found a billion four-leaf clovers, it would not convince me that there was a God trying to send me a message, and I don't know why it would for anybody else. So that's what I think.
I appreciate that you came to share these thoughts. I think that really, like, you coming here and trying to put that idea to the test. Like, you said you haven't brought this to many people. I appreciate that you brought this here, because to me that speaks of somebody who, to some degree, like, you want to be skeptical, right? You're putting this to the test. You're saying, will other people find this as convincing as I do? And what I would ask of you, John, is to continue with that mindset. I would ask you to take that mindset that you've brought to that caused you to call the line and have this conversation with us here today, and really keep that in the back of your mind when you're kind of like interpreting the world around you, whether it be with these clovers or otherwise. I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah, the real point is that this experience had a certain quality that I discovered, and that I learned to find other places. It's one unique quality that when I learned to identify it and look for it. Sorry?
The experience of finding a four-leaf clover had a quality? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it had an experiential quality to it.
Can you describe that quality?
Unfortunately, no. It's ineluctable, unfortunately.
I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I think a lot of people have qualities that are difficult to describe. Like, sometimes when the fall rolls around and I'm walking around outside, I can smell the air just right, and it takes me right back to being in elementary school, getting ready to go to school in the fall, right? But that doesn't mean that that's a sign. That just means that there's some connection that my brain makes to that other people's brains won't make. And I think that, given what you've told us here, especially about your relationship with clovers in the past, I think that it's perfectly reasonable to at least consider that your relationship with these clovers is because you went to a church that put a particular significance on four-leaf clovers.
Well,
right?
it's not really about the clovers, really. It's about the discovery of a quality that when I investigate that quality where I find it in life, it leads to good experiences.
But I thought part of the argument was that it was four-leaf clovers were significant to you in particular because they had this direct through line to the church that you grew. I thought that was part of the argument.
It is, yeah, but that's where I discovered this positive quality, this experiential
I don't understand how you can keep talking about a positive quality that you can't describe and then say, when you go looking for this quality elsewhere in the world. Well, I mean, there are songs that make me cry pretty much every time. And specific performances, not, a specific recording, not just the song itself. There are pieces of art that I might find almost overwhelming and others that I'm bored by. There are experiences, whether communal experiences in religious settings or in secular settings, where I will feel goosebumps and elation. There's a way to say that the euphoric, orgasmic feeling that can be attributed to sex can also be attributed to some drugs. I can find those qualities of experience out there somewhere, but I can also talk about what it is. I don't know how you can go looking for an experience and have such a significant connection to a quality of an experience and not be able to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe it's like peace, or I don't know. It's not really a sensory quality.
But at the end of the day, however you describe it, does having that quality of experience in any way demonstrate that it's coming from a God?
No.
There's a writer named Robert Wright who he has a book called Why Buddhism is True, and I find it to be a very interesting text because he's not arguing for a spiritual Buddhism, but rather it's a very clickbaity title to talk about the benefits of meditation and how he finds all these benefits from meditation, helps him center himself, like whatever. Like he's a pretty secular individual. But I find it really interesting as a read because he describes specifically the direct similarities between his experience in meditating and the experience that like actual Buddhists talk or the other religious folks who meditate talk about when they meditate and directly attribute to spirituality. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because I do think it's possible for people to have the very same feeling, or at least something that exhibits the same sort of almost ethereal qualities that we perceive as that, at least. And one person can experience them and say, well, that simply must be spiritual. And somebody else can look at them and say, well, no, I think that's a perfectly secular experience feeling that I'm getting because of, very explainable reasons. So I don't think it's unfair for Matt to kind of ask here, why you can't describe that feeling. Because I feel like other people have been capable of delving into like, oh, well, it's spiritual because it connects me with XYZ, or it reminds me of ABC, or whatever. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I don't really have any point to argue here, or I mean, I just I didn't want to like change your guys' minds or be shaken of disbelief, but I just wanted to talk about it and see what you guys had to say. And I remain rational, employed. I'm not a crazy person or anything like that. I just had this episode in my life that brought me to a new type of awareness. It has had good consequences the more I invest in it. So I just wanted to, say that out loud.
What does it make you aware of?
Bounce it off of somebody. Yeah, I know. I mean, that's the weird thing. Is just like I feel like I'm tuned in to something that is that something's out there. I guess it tuned me into a faith. Faith in what? I don't know. A greater sense of purpose or order or something like that.
it seems really strange, and I'm going to let you go after this because we got other callers waiting, but it seems really strange to say that it's made you aware of something, but you also can't describe what that is.
Yeah, some kind of direction, maybe. Like I feel like I'm on a path, something, and when I have choices to make, I can feel more strongly connected to one of them versus the others. It just reminds me of that particular quality. Yeah, it's like I haven't really developed this thought very well. It's just something that I experience.
Okay.
Yeah, happy Sunday, guys. Thanks for taking the call.
Okay.
No problem,
Thanks.
John. Thanks for sharing with us.
All right, happy Memorial Day.
You too. Yeah, it's Memorial Day in the United States. It's Memorial Day weekend, and that's in memory of the people who fought and died in various wars. While I've got 8 years in the military, I obviously didn't die. And I'm really, really, really happy about that.
We're happy too, Matt. We're glad to have you.
It's a very good thing to not be dead. I understand why some people might want that to be the case forever, that they never die. I understand the appeal of it. I just don't understand why anyone thinks it's actual.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a huge difference between, this is my personal perspective on it, but there's a very big difference between someone who's like, yeah, I understand that there's not a rational reason to believe this thing that I believe, but it gives me comfort, whatever. That there's a leap and bound between that and someone who's like, no, my thing is provable, and not just that, it's evident, it's obviously evident, and you're kind of an idiot for not agreeing with me. Very, very different ways of looking at things. I have gripes with both for different reasons, I think.
Yeah, it's it's like one of those things. I can see how and why somebody gets from A to B, but when I'm having a conversation with somebody and we're at this point of there's an ineffable quality. Cool. I can appreciate that there are things that we aren't very good at describing or understanding, but I don't know what quality of an experience there could be that could get me to look for that experience elsewhere, spend time thinking about that experience and what it's doing in my life, especially if we're talking about something as possibly as mundane as finding four-leaf clovers at a higher rate. But it seems like not only are you correct in pointing out that we're the best at pattern recognition.
To my understanding, it's not even close. Yeah.
We seem to also, in the same way that we seek patterns, we also see agency and see intent, even where there isn't any, because that's the difference between a type 1 and a type 2 error. It would be better for us to err on the side of that leaf, that the branch over there is rustling because there's something dangerous there. If we're wrong, it's not going to cause us anything. Or sorry, if we're wrong and there's no creature there, it's not going to cost anything. But if we assume that, oh, it's just the wind and it turns out to be something that kills us, then that's a much more serious error. And
it's a Smilodon's wager.
Yeah. And then we couple it with looking for meaning. Why am I finding more four-leaf clovers than usual? Why do I feel this way? Why does this quality of experience seem to bring me peace that lets me make a better decision? I don't know. First of all, I don't know whether or not it does. I don't know what the why is. And I would be fine if I got calls every week from somebody that's like, weird stuff's been happening. I kind of wonder if it's a message from the universe, from the stars, from the gods, from another realm, whatever else. My answer would be the same every time. I have no idea. I don't see any good reason to think it is, but I have no idea. But I keep hearing from people who are like, and this I'm going to decide, rather than saying, I don't know, or just running with it. It's probably a God. It's probably this. I'm going to try to create a religion. I'm going to try to make this an important part of, my life. And I'm like, if there's a God and he's got an important message for us, why the fuck would he ever just make you find more clovers? That doesn't seem like an efficient way to communicate anything. Why would he give you experiences with qualities that you can't describe to people? Is the purpose to not share this information, for everybody to find this cool thing?
Yeah, I mean, like a couple thoughts on that, right? Like the end of that call kind of reminded me of like when I've talked to people who have like tripped on, done pretty crazy acid trips, right? And they're like, "Ah, man, like it was this crazy quality, and it opened my mind's eye." And I'm like, "Hey, man, good for you. That's not for me. Like that's great that it works for you, awesome. But that experience doesn't translate very well." But we're both okay with just saying, "Okay, the experience doesn't translate very well. They had a weird acid trip. Like that's fine." Again, like you said, there's a difference when you assign agency to it. And I think a really good example of the sort of lethal cocktail that you talked about a minute ago of pattern recognition and human curiosity, which is where it's like, okay, well, we're curious and we like to see, like, we like to anthropomorphize everything around us. We've been doing it since the dawn of time. It's why all of our deities are like deities of aspects of nature or half animal or whatever. We like doing that. And it helps us understand the world around us, and has for a very long time until we've sort of been able to divorce ourselves from that. You see that all the time with like the prevalency of engineers being intelligent design advocates, right? Because they're engineers, so they do nothing but study human design. And then when they look at biology, their brain is trained on the pattern of recognizing design. And so they see it everywhere. They see it absolutely everywhere. And I think that sucks because they're nature designs all the time. You see these wonderful geometric crystals that seem to be, almost palace-like in structure. You see natural arches that form. No one made those arches. No one made those crystals, and yet they appear designed all the same. So I think it's a grave error that's unfortunately very easy for a lot of us to make. You don't have, it's not. You're not a dummy if you fall into that trap, but it's always worth a second look. You got to check yourself on that kind of thing.
Well, we've got 4 callers remaining, 2 theists and 2 atheists. I'm going to get to the theists first. So for the 2 atheists that are waiting, I know you've been waiting for the entirety of the show. But we've got a thing where we're going to prioritize the theist calls. And I'm going to take this one, even though it's been on the least amount of time, because I think it's going to be the easiest to just address really quick. Jason in Michigan's a theist who wants to say that just because there's suffering doesn't mean there's no God. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, that's correct.
I agree and have never said otherwise, and would chastise anyone who says otherwise. You can't prove there's no God merely because there's suffering.
Okay. Then I was saying that I had heard briefly your previous comments toward one of the other people and saying something about the kids with cancer and suffering. That's all I caught, though. But I do believe that there is a God, and I do believe that it's provable.
Okay, well, I'm definitely interested in hearing proof that there's a God, but not only did I not suggest or even hint at the fact that kids with cancer is proof there isn't a God, I was pointing out the absurdity of thinking God's sending you hidden messages in 4-leaf clovers, but isn't, replying to families that are suffering in other ways. That doesn't make any sense for a lot of different types of God. My position, by the way, is not that we can demonstrate that there is no God. It's that nobody has demonstrated that there is. And so it sounds like you're getting ready to do that. So, Jason, the floor to prove God exists is all yours.
Okay. And yeah, my apologies. I only caught the tail end of that conversation, so sorry for taking it out of context. I believe that the proof that God exists is the creation, the finely tuned creation that we have, and the huge improbability of it ever coming about by anything other than an intelligent designer. Much like if I walked into the forest and saw a neatly set table with glasses and water and food and a knife and a fork, if I saw all that in the middle of nowhere in the jungle and somebody told me nobody had ever been there, that table would be proof that the person was wrong, that somebody had been there.
You know why?
Why?
Because all the evidence that we have is that a table set for food is the result of humans. Every table you've ever seen that has been set for food has been done so by a human. You have zero evidence that that can occur naturally. That is not the same as a universe. We have no other universes to compare it to. You can't look at the universe and say, oh, this had to occur because of a God. And it doesn't matter how improbable you feel the universe is, you have to show that God is more probable if you're going to even go down the road of saying that's the more probable explanation. So, how probable is God as a creator, and how did you reach that conclusion?
The way I reached the conclusion that God is probable is the truth of the things in the Bible that were written by ignorant shepherds thousands of years ago who were not scientists and had no education or no training in the things that they were discussing, that weren't figured out by actual scientists until thousands of years later.
Like what?
I think that's evidence. Like, okay, so there used to be a period of time where people thought the earth was flat, and there's a scripture in Isaiah that says God sits above the circle of the earth. Nobody has been up high enough to say that but God.
But it also
Jason.
says that there's a tree from which you can see the entirety of the earth. Is that possible?
Where does it say that at?
I'll look it up.
So while
I've never
you're
heard that.
while you're looking that up, Matt, Jason, are you into hermeneutics? Like, do you read a lot about hermeneutics?
Not much, no. I'm familiar with it, but I don't read very much about it.
So there's a word when it's actually, I believe, in the verse in Isaiah that you're talking about, if memory serves, although I could be wrong. It could be a verse in Exodus, or it could be the original Genesis verse that talks about when God spreads the heavens out, right? And I've seen a lot of creationists or Christians in general talk about how, oh, this is God talking about how he's spreading out during the Big Bang. It's the expansion of space-time. But the word that God uses when he's talking about like separating the sky from the earth, right? He talks about the firmament. He talks about the firmament being kind of what separates the waters above from the waters below. And the word that he uses for that is a word called rakia. And rakia is used only to refer to solid objects such as metal, glassworks, things like that. Every other time that it's mentioned, at least to my understanding, in the Hebrew Bible. Is there a reason God might talk about the firmament being a solid dome over the earth if he didn't mean that it was a solid dome? And furthermore, is there a solid dome over the earth?
Well, I think that the reason God mentioned it the way he mentioned it is because that's the way he created it. And I think that there is definitely a solid dome over the earth separating I believe in the firmament. I believe there's a solid dome over the earth separating the waters above from the waters below, just like the Bible says.
Right now, I just want to be clear. Right now, you think there's a firmament above the earth?
I'm glad I asked that question.
I do.
Okay, Erika, this is all yours. I'm going to take a quick break.
Yeah, I mean, golly, I feel like the first thing I have to ask is, like, do you believe that we've been to space?
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right. Do you believe that the earth is...
There's an interesting song by Red Hot Chili Peppers called Californication, and in the lyrics he says, "Space might be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement." I don't think that it's a coincidence that what NASA claims comes from outer space directly coincides with the actual video technology that they have. When we look at what they said was space back in the 60s, it looks like the same technology as the movie of Martians. And then when we look at what they say is outer space now, it looks like one of the latest astronaut movies with one of the latest actors. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that the word NASA in Hebrew means deception.
We've seen impact events, right, on stellar bodies, but like this is a much better question that I have to ask. Where did the craters come from? The craters on the surface of the Earth, because a meteor can't presumably get through the firmament, I would imagine. So where do the craters come from? I would imagine so too.
That's a great question. And why are there never any parts of asteroids in the craters?
But there are all the time, and they're in museums, and we've seen impact events happen today. The Tunguska event is a very famous one that was caught fully on film.
And this is just from my knowledge, I'm not an expert on this issue at all, but every crater I've seen that is supposed to have been from some asteroid at some point in time, I have never seen the asteroids. I've seen the craters, and I think craters can be explained by geysers in places that there used to be water. I think there's a lot of possible explanation for craters, but I don't have a definite one.
So I've got to just tell you, like, we find asteroids, like meteorites, in craters, and we find them all the time. Like, there's hundreds of meteors that make it through our atmosphere, or at least make it to the atmosphere, every single day. I've seen some of them myself, right, streaking across the sky. There was a viral Twitter video 2 days ago of a meteor impact that happened in oh shoot, I think it was Portugal, right? This woman is recording herself, and she looks up, and a meteor goes streaking across the sky. Right? They know where it was projected to land. So I'm like so curious. I don't know about that one, but I know about the Tunguska event, that they knew precisely where it landed because it left a giant crater. It broke everybody's windows within like a 50-mile radius. Everybody's windows in a 50-mile radius was broken by the Tunguska event. And there was a massive crater that blew out every tree directly radially out from where the impact actually happened. And this kind of thing, there was a woman that was hit by a meteor like within the past 150 years. She's like the only person that's ever been struck by an actual meteor. It was a very small one, but she was actually hit by it. Like, where are these falling rocks coming from?
Well, see, again, I don't have enough information. I'm very skeptical. I am more skeptical than most scientists who claim to be skeptical.
No,
and
you're not.
I would have to do. Oh, I'm very much more skeptical than most scientists that claim to be skeptical. Yes.
No, you're not.
But
you don't understand what skepticism is. Why, if you have no expertise and you're reaching conclusions about this stuff, why should anybody listen to you over a scientist and the data?
I never said anybody should listen to me. I said I don't have enough information about asteroids to give any kind of definitive answer.
You've reached a conclusion about the shape of the Earth and asteroids while acknowledging that you don't have sufficient expertise to warrant reaching a conclusion. That's not skepticism, sir. That's not even in the ballpark of skepticism.
What is my conclusion on asteroids?
I didn't say you made a conclusion on asteroids.
You just said that I reached a conclusion on the shape of the Earth and on asteroids with zero information about it.
No, I said on asteroid impacts. Or at least I thought I said asteroid impacts. If I didn't, that's what I meant. My apologies.
No problem. But even asteroid impacts, I haven't made. Well, I just want to say, for clarification, I've reached a conclusion on the shape of the Earth, yes, but on asteroid impacts, I've said I don't have enough information to know. I can make a guess, but I'm not educated enough on that subject to make any kind of definitive statement or take any kind of definitive position on that. I don't have.
But you are on the shape of the Earth?
I believe what the Bible says about the shape of the Earth, yes.
Yeah, but that's not skepticism, sir. That's you believing dogma.
Well, skepticism when it comes to humans, biblical, I'm not skeptical about the Bible. I'm skeptical about the television.
Then you're not being skeptical, and you're not more skeptical than a science if you're not being skeptical about the Bible. Skepticism doesn't cherry pick what it's going to be skeptical about.
But you can also be more skeptical in one area than other people are.
You can be, but that doesn't mean you should be. Skepticism should be skeptical about everything.
I would disagree. I think the Bible is the thing that we can
trust. Well, you're wrong.
In this
I'm
world.
telling you, as somebody who's been a skeptic from the beginning, you can disagree with me about skepticism, just like you can disagree about the scientist, about the shape of the Earth, but you are wrong, and demonstrably so.
So I'd like to interject here with a story that I really feel you need to look up. I think you need to look up the tale of Anne Hodges, who was struck by a meteorite that multiple people saw that crashed through her roof and left an enormous wound on her side. She survived it because it only caught her on the side. But this is something that happened in recorded human history that actually impacted a live human, and then we have hundreds, if not thousands. And I know this because I just went to the Wikipedia article where you can sort by, or you have to manually sort it, but known craters and known meteorites that were found within those craters, including the Tunguska event. It was seen by numerous people, and it wasn't even the only meteorite that they found in the Tunguska Basin. They found all sorts of little miniature bolides that also were of extraterrestrial origin because they have a composition that only meteorites have. high amounts of iridium, right? Like I've actually, Jason, I've never heard this take before, that meteorites aren't from space. That's actually crazy to me. May I ask, how old do you think the Earth is?
Well, let me ask you a quick question before I answer that, if you don't mind. Do you think that
Yeah.
all the people that have seen apparitions or images of Jesus Christ, do you think that all those people and all those documented events and recorded incidents, do you think that's proof of God?
No.
I don't, and I can guarantee
And why
you
would I
that the
think that
number of
meteors are proof that there's not a God, or that
because
that the actual meteors are coming from?
Because meteors, I'm going to mute you.
because
ahead,
tens to hundreds to thousands of people, including myself, witness meteors every single night, right, as they streak across the sky. Hundreds of people have worked with meteors, probably thousands have worked with meteors, and at least hundreds of people, especially talking about, like, just because I know it the best, the Tunguska event, have seen streak through the sky and crash, and then they have recovered the meteorite that created the impact event. These are events that are so ridiculously common that you can buy a telescope, Jason, go to like Black Mesa State Park, set it up, and you will see meteors streaking across the sky. Or I bet you could go to a museum and see an actual meteorite, and you can see how their composition only matches other meteorites. So let's just take a step back and imagine from a scientific perspective that meteorites, the rocks themselves, come from Earth. Why does every single meteorite within their given category of like stony meteorites or whatever, but within their given category, why do they all match? They're all over the world, various sizes, right? Various time periods. Sometimes they're, millions of years within the rock. Sometimes they're on the surface. And yet they all have the exact same composition. And when new meteors come, they match that composition too. And that composition doesn't exist anywhere on the planet by natural means. Like, where would they be coming from? I'm sorry, that's wild to me.
And I'll unmute you here in just a second, Jason, but it's important to point out the absolute epic failure of skepticism and reasonable epistemology. Every single person who has an apparitional experience that they attribute to Jesus is concrete evidence that people have experiences that they attribute to Jesus. It is not concrete evidence that their attribution is correct. And similarly, as we observe meteors and begin to investigate them, that's concrete evidence that there are meteors. That's not concrete evidence of their origin. Erika has just gone into the similarities and not to mention the fact that we have geosynchronous satellites orbiting the oblate spheroid Earth, not the flat Earth, and that everything about mathematics and gravity and I'm going to guess you don't believe in gravity, since that's part of what gets thrown out too. But if you think that the
you don't
fact
need
that
gravity.
people, if you, sorry, what?
According to Occam's razor, you don't need gravity, just density.
No. And thank you for
You
demonstrating
definitely
denseness for sure.
need gravity.
But gravity is the description of mass's interaction, and the mathematics of gravity, everything from the accretion disk from a sun that leads to the potential formation of planets. You just, when I took you off mute, just before we could even get to anything substantive, you just asserted we don't need gravity. Where is your expertise and your evidence that suggests that gravity isn't real?
By my observation, that a pencil will fall when I let go of it, not because of gravity, but Occam's razor says the fewest amount of steps to a conclusion.
No, sir. I'm going to mute you again. First of all, you're not going to misrepresent what Occam's razor said. Occam's razor says not to multiply entities unnecessarily. You and I can both let go of a pen and observe that it falls in a particular direction. You do not get to assert that that is not a demonstration of gravity. You have to prove that it's not a demonstration of gravity. How do you prove that me letting go of a pen and it falling down is not a demonstration of gravity?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, that's what happens when I ask you a question. It's then your turn to talk. And because I'm an expert who's done this for 20 years, I know to take you off mute before I ask you the question, which is why you also heard a beep. So what's your demonstration that a pin falling to Earth is not a demonstration of gravity?
Because it's more dense than the oxygen around it. That's why it falls, not because of, I don't need gravity to explain it.
I don't even know where to begin with that. And let me guess, you do
Is
think
it
the Earth
not
is
true that dense objects go down and helium is lighter than oxygen, so it goes up?
Well, why does it go down, sir?
Because it's more dense than the oxygen around it.
It's more
Sure.
dense than the oxygen around it. Why doesn't it go up? It's more dense than that too. As a matter of fact, as you proceed into the upper atmosphere, it becomes less and less dense.
That was my
Why is it
question as
moving
well.
towards the thing? Why is it moving towards the thing that is more massive and more dense than the area that is less massive and less dense? Why is it going that direction?
Because dense objects go down, less dense
No, sir.
objects go up.
No,
Where's
sir.
the gravity
No,
with the helium
sir.
balloon?
There's absolutely nothing in the realm of science. There's nothing in the realm of physics that say dense objects go down. When you're talking about buoyancy, which is essentially what you're doing, and whether or not something denser will float or whatever, that's fluid dynamics, and it would suggest that things would float up because they're floating towards the least dense. So your model is absolutely flawed because you don't understand either what the science says about density or buoyancy or fluid dynamics. And you're doing all of that in order to dismiss gravity with your flawed understanding of Occam's razor. You have it absolutely wrong. You are engaged in what I would call fractal wrongness. You are wrong at every conceivable resolution.
Can you explain to me then why gravity doesn't operate on a helium balloon, but it operates on, say, a table?
Gravity absolutely operates on a helium balloon, just like everything else. The gravity is the interaction between events relative to both the distance between them and proportional to their mass. When you see a helium balloon rise, it's not because it has defied gravity, but because the helium, its buoyancy, carries it into the upper atmosphere. There is still the force of gravity acting on it, directing it towards the largest mass around, which is Earth. In the same way that we can launch a spacecraft out of there, we can provide sufficient acceleration such that we can escape gravity's pull on that object that holds it to the Earth. This is all like kindergarten and first grade science stuff, maybe a little bit more than that, but
You're
yeah.
comparing
You
a
know-
I'm not
space
even a
shuttle to a
scientist.
balloon with no jet propulsion.
What was that?
I said it sounds like you're comparing a space shuttle and a lot of gas to a balloon with helium in it that has no kind of jet
Yes,
propulsion pushing it against what you're
I
saying.
compared two things that both can demonstrate that they can overcome the default pull of an object and the Earth towards each other. You can either do that by filling the object with a gas that causes it to be buoyant, or you can do it by propelling an object with a gas that gives it enough speed to break past gravity's pull. It's not the same thing at all.
You're saying it has nothing to do with the fact that the helium is less dense than the oxygen around it?
Jason, I literally just explained to you that the helium is providing that buoyancy because it's less dense, and there are other ways to overcome the pull of gravity as well by using a fuel source.
Jason, why is gravity consistent? Why is the pull of gravity a consistent measurement regardless of what's being dropped, regardless of where it's being dropped on the surface of planet Earth, excluding extremely high heights?
Why does a
is
feather
gravity-
and a
I'm not
bowling
sure that
ball,
gravity-
why does a feather in a vacuum and a bowling ball fall at 9.8 meters per second squared near the Earth? Are they equally buoyant? Are they equally massive? They're not.
The
Your
mass of a
model is
bowling ball
flawed,
is
and
more
this
than
is
the mass.
no, Jason. This is embarrassingly bad. This is the basics of science that you are. I can't even take you seriously, and I apologize for that because I'm not just sitting here. It's not my goal to go, oh, here's another prank caller, here's another troll. But when you don't know the basics of buoyancy and you're using that to deny gravity, when you don't know the basics of science and you're using that to deny gravity in order to hold up a notion of a flat Earth, you are beyond preposterous. And I don't know how to continue from here.
How is it if the Earth is curved that we can see directly across flat water, which is always flat? How can we see lengths? How can we see buildings at distances that should be hundreds or even thousands of feet below the curve of the Earth? How is that possible?
So first of all, Jason, the Earth is huge. So that's why over short, like very small water bodies that happens, but over large water bodies, and you can see this yourself with offshore wind turbines, right? Like on like wind farms and things like that. What you're talking about does happen. The height of the wind fan actually does disappear below the curve. You can see this for yourself.
I would recommend you go over to my, I would recommend you stop talking. I would recommend you go watch my friend Simon Dan's channel, where he explains this stuff over and over and over again. Every time some scientifically illiterate flat earther demonstrates, you remember when the flat earthers put together, they were going to go out and try and measure whether or not there was a curve, and their measurements showed that there was.
Yeah, the laser pointer and the platforms. Yeah, I know the one you're talking about.
Oh,
yeah,
it lines up and it comes out exactly what the math shows for this. I mean, we've known this since before we understood anything about electricity. Eratosthenes measured the curvature of the Earth by using shadows of sticks and shadows in wells. We did this before we could turn on a light bulb. The fact that you in 2024 are using a cellular device going through geosynchronous satellites to communicate to us that you don't think gravity is real, that the Earth is flat, that there's not a curve. This is embarrassingly bad. If you want to call yourself a skeptic, everyone should point and laugh.
The distance.
Thanks for the call, though, Jason.
People are able to.
Nope, you're done.
Holy mackerel!
I have my limit for flat Earth.
You know what, Matt? When you got up, so when I brought up the thing about the firmament, my hope, the reason I brought it up in the first place was because I thought he was going to argue that the Bible predicted the Earth was round, and I was about to be like, no, the Bible actually says that the Earth is flat, and he was like, yup, the Bible does predict the Earth is flat, and it is. And I was like, oh no, this is not where I thought we were going.
I just realized I mentioned the verse that says there's a tree. And you can see it from anywhere on Earth. This was in one of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. It's in Daniel 4:20. So everybody should be able to remember that one real easy. Daniel 4:20 says, "You saw a tree that grew so big and strong that it reached up to heaven and could be seen from anywhere on Earth." That's not possible on a sphere.
Well, there's a verse as well. There's a verse as well that says that pi equals 3 and that the Earth is set about on the pillars, right? Oh, is there not?
No, Sam Harris included that in.
I didn't know that.
I called him out for it a couple different times.
No, that's good to know. That's good to know.
What it says is that there's a well that was constructed, and when it gives the dimensions of the well, it doesn't say circumference, but it gives its roundabout measure and its across measure. And so they're doing that to say, oh, it says 3 cubits and 10 cubits, and that suggests that pi equals 3. But first of all, it's not giving anything about radius, diameter, or circumference. And it's possible that, and people have done this with a diagram, it's possible to create a well with a lip that is such that there could be a diameter of 3 on like the inner dimension, but the roundabout thing could be 10 because of the thickness and everything else. So somebody could have been given, and you got to remember, we're talking about people who were measuring things in cubits based on, a distance like this. So nobody was saying anything about pi. Okay,
that's good to know, because I've definitely repeated that one before.
I did too, until I was like, hang on. But
no, this is the wonderful thing about being corrected, because then you can be less wrong in the future.
Exactly. We have two calls from atheists to finish out the show, and I'm going to start with Eric in Michigan, whose family's Jehovah's Witness, wants advice on how to deal with it. Eric, you've been on hold for 2 hours and 9 minutes. The floor is now yours, and thank you for your incredible patience.
No problem. It's just I hope our call goes a little bit better than the other one from Michigan. Don't want to leave
It
full
probably will,
taste
but we'll
of
see.
that one. But yeah,
It's gonna be
it's
tough.
just my whole family before I was born was all in the congregation, and it's just me being also homosexual and all that kind of stuff. It's really hard trying to figure out what I should do with my whole family situation because I don't want to keep living, a lie, but at the same time, I want to be me.
Yeah.
Can I ask Eric? And I'm stealing this from Paulogia, who last time I was on Skeptalk, he kind of introduced me to this, and I think that this is a wonderful first way to ask to open this kind of conversation. Are you financially dependent or independent on your folks right now? And are you safe? Do you feel that you would be safe if you did talk to them about this?
I live at home, but I just got accepted to the university I wanted to go to, so probably going to move out into a dorm. But
Are you
currently.
financially covered on that, or are they footing the bill for it? Like, are you at risk of if you told them pulling the rug out from under you on that?
No, that's
Okay.
all going to be on me.
So that gives you a lot more freedom than some folks who are kind of limited in what they can do because they still are living at home. So are you hoping to kind of like come out to your parents of like your lack of belief in not being like a Jehovah's Witness and just wondering how to go about doing that? May I ask, if that's the case, how your family has perhaps been receptive in the past to things that you've disagreed with them on? Like, is this something that you would be in any way in any danger, do you think?
I'm not completely sure because when they started, figuring out that I was gay, because it's kind of not a secret, but like I came out, but they kind of pushed me back in. But no, but I honestly, it's a toss up with them because our entire family, we're not very, emotionally connected. We don't really talk about what we feel, and that's one of the biggest reasons why it's just like I feel like I'm with blinders with everybody. Like I don't know what's going to happen.
So I'm way, way, way out of my element. Because when you talk about coming out to your family and they sort of pushed you back in, I'm just guessing that they either did it's a phase, no, you're not, or don't you dare say that. You need to rethink this or something along those lines, where they were not accepting, but in a way that kind of, did you retract it at some point and say, I'm not?
Yeah, well, because my mom, what she said, and this kind of stuck with me, is like that she said that, "Oh, you're choosing this,"
So
which I was like,
first and foremost, Eric, like I want you to know that homosexuality, like being gay, is one of the most natural things out there for social mammals like us, right? Like it exists in all sorts of species. It is very much a normal part of human variation. So I feel very strongly like, one, even if it was a choice, it doesn't matter. It's a choice that you get to make, and it's nobody's business which you do, and who you love. That's up to you. But I'm also a firm believer that, like, again, it's a part of normal human variation. So don't let your folks kind of make you feel like this is something that you're like doing to them, which is almost how it seems like she's framing it, and that's kind of manipulative. I mean, I find that extremely manipulative, is I'll put it quite frankly. I certainly understand like why you're at where you're at now, because like all of us want to keep our parents happy, you know, assuming we love our parents. That's something that a lot of people, it's a very easy thing to kind of fall into. It's happened to me myself. So I want you to know that like that's not something that, you know, you should feel like weird or bad about. But at the same time, it sucks to have to feel like you're living like a lie, like you can't be yourself around the people that are supposed to support you and love you the most in the world. So I'm really, really sorry that you're in that situation.
It's something that neither one of us, I mean, we can empathize and be supportive. But if you're calling for advice, here's the best I can do. First of all, it might be worth reaching out to seculartherapy.org to find a secular counselor to give you better information about this. It's also going to be valuable, especially, you know, as you head out to university. Um, I'm fine with people staying in a closet if they do so for reasons of safety or even comfort. You don't owe anybody an explanation for who you are or anything else. You don't have to be out to anybody about anything. And there's going to come a point where you're going to say, I have to engage with people as me and kind of let the chips fall where they may. You need to make sure that you're in the safest place possible to actually do that, that you are ready for any and all potential consequences, including losing relationships with people that are near you. And you're the only one that can make this decision. And there are people that go their entire lives without actually doing it. It's just never the right time. It's never this. I genuinely hope that's not the case for you and that you get to be, you know, your authentic self with anyone and everyone. And but I genuinely, I understand the conflicts with family. My conflicts with the family are more about religion and politics, and me being supportive of, you know, of the LGBT community, and of you know, pregnant people's right to choose and have autonomy over their body and make decisions based on science with their doctor without the interference of politicians or priests or poets even, just to keep the alliteration going. But it's seculartherapy.org is probably the best resource, but also finding a community. When you get to college, um, and I haven't been, and I certainly haven't been as a gay man. So find yourself some gay friends and some people who are in similar circumstances. You know, find your local gay straight alliance and you know, flag group, things like that. So that there's going to be people going through the same thing that you are, and there's going to be people who've already gone through a chunk of it. You need to leverage those people both as friends and mentors so that when things don't go the way you expect that they're going, there's somebody else can be like, that shit happened to me too. Yep, that was exactly, you know, this was the frustrating thing. Oh, you should have seen what my grandmother said to me about this. And there's also this notion of when you come out, you let people be almost as awful as they want or need to be for some period of time, because you're the one in the relationship whose status has changed and changed the status of the relationship. That does not mean it is your fault. This isn't a fault thing here. But if people are in a relationship and they presume that someone is straight, gay, happy, whatever, and that changes, you have to recognize that you're the one that changed it. That's not about putting responsibility on you, but it's about, you know, okay, we cut people a little bit of slack for a while, and then you're going to have to put your foot down on boundaries, and you're going to have to say, okay, I let you act foolish for a while. I put up with the ridiculous questions over and over again. I put up with you saying, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I put up with, you know, the God talk coming at me all the time, and this and this and this and this. I did all that because I love you and I value our relationship. And I realized that I'm the one who, not through any choice of my own, but I changed the nature of the relationship. I hit you with a surprise. And when you hit somebody with a surprise, you get to give them time to go, and that time, mom, that time, grandpa, is over now. I'm going to draw a line right here. I still want to maintain relationships with you, but this thing is off the table. I'm gay. Deal with it. You'll get to that point, but I want you to make sure you get to that point when you're ready to face whatever consequences, and when you have support network and people around. And that can be through psychotherapy.org or a flag group or any of the things I mentioned.
I think
Yeah.
you'll find too, Eric, that college, you said you're set up, you're ready to go, like it's an independent thing from your parents. I think you're going to find that the freedom that affords you is going to be a phenomenal change in your quality of life, because it doesn't matter where you're going to school. I went to college in a pretty conservative southern state, and our like the gay presence at my university was very strong. It's just the nature of a university. It's a whole bunch of different people from all walks of life that are all inhabiting the same zone and seeking a higher education. You're going to find a group. You're going to find people that are going to be empathetic. You're going to find people that are going to be kind. You're going to find people that give you phenomenal advice. And I hope that knowing that that's down the line at least eases the feeling of the unease, right? Of knowing that, or at least I assume if you're eventually planning on like talking to your folks about it and like telling, like basically, like you said, coming out of the closet, right? That's coming down the road. I agree with Matt. I think you want to make sure that you have a support system in place ready to go, because if your experience is unfortunately like the experience of many people who have super religious folks, and they come out to them, there are going to be some people who are just going to act like assholes. And it doesn't matter how strong you are, and it doesn't matter, how tough you are, or whatever. That can hurt. It hurts all of us when people we love say things that are harsh, even when they don't mean it. And they might mean it because they might be really jerks, or they might not. So having that support system in place which you will, again, inevitably find when you go to university is going to be phenomenal. And I'm so glad to hear that that's set up.
Yeah, it's that, but it's also the fact of Jehovah's Witnesses as a community, and I don't know if you guys know, but if somebody's in the truth and they decide that they want to leave, then they're basically excommunicated and they should be shunned and treated like they don't exist. And
Yep.
I've been on YouTube and I've seen all the other XJWs and how their family reacted to them and how they still don't talk to some of their relatives, and it's hard.
It's a way of making it more difficult. I'm opposed to, so for example, there are people who talk about and encourage disassociation from your family of origin. The one that talks about it the most is definitely a kook, and not advocating for legit, reliable science. But it is simply true that when you start setting boundaries about who it is difficult to set those boundaries without pissing people off. And I should probably stop trying to add stuff, because I don't know where else to go from here, but it is absolutely, I feel your frustration, because the religions intentionally make it so that, you're not going to be a part of us, then we're going to make your life even fucking worse. We're going to dissociate from you. We're going to make your family dissociate from you. We're going to make sure that, every supportive aspect of who you are and what you thought you had gets taken away because you didn't toe the line. That absolutely, for me, is enough to suggest the religion is a lie at best and vile at worst, because it is essentially stealing the relationships you have because of who you are. I can't figure out how that could possibly be supportive or supported.
Well, And well, luckily, there's a lot of places that are now figuring out how bad Jehovah's Witnesses are and finally persecuting them, but that's been taking forever. But
Yeah,
no,
it's a common issue
Well,
that I hear
and
from
recognizing it
families.
and knowing how difficult it is doesn't make it any easier. I mean, we all three of us, sitting here know that this situation, like, there's going to be parts of it that are going to suck, and that's horrible. I hate that that is the case. I'm so glad that people are moving towards holding these folks accountable when they do things like alienate their family for something, for an identity that they have, or that they person that they are. But that doesn't make it easier. And you sound like a really strong person. You're going to get through it. It doesn't make it any easier, but sometimes I think it at least eases the pain when it's like it, people are empathizing and saying, yeah, it does. Yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah. I tell you what, take some time, Eric, and think about this. Let your life move forward a bit. Consider what Erika and I said, and also reach out to an expert and check back in. Let me know, has did you find a way to navigate this that didn't lead to disaster, or did things end up even worse than you expected? Because your experience, however it turns out, is going to be beneficial to someone, and it's one of the reasons why I suggested you find other people who've been in similar situations, especially at university, college, because their experience can help you.
right. Yeah. I really do appreciate that, though. Is I'm one of those people that kind of catastrophize in my head, and thoughts get running out of control.
Mm.
So
These days,
Happens to
we're
all of
all
us.
sometimes,
like that a little bit, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
think.
That is tale as old as time.
On that note, thanks so much, Eric. Reach out, let me know how it goes. But yeah, don't forget about psychotherapy.org. There's resources out there for people in your situation, and you are not alone. This has happened before. This isn't even the first time somebody's called in a similar situation on this network in the last month. So yeah.
Yeah, I've been on
But thanks,
calls that
Eric.
have covered similar topics.
all right. Well, thank you. I don't want to hold you guys.
No. It was our pleasure, and I hope, I genuinely hope you find a way to navigate this where it's where you come out better than some other people have. But thanks, Eric.
Take care.
We have the final call for today. And for those people who normally watch my Wednesday evening show, we don't read out all the super chats on this show. This is primarily just we're taking calls and having fun. And it's worth it for me to, what's that?
I said hanging out.
Yeah. I need to remind people that this is only one of, I don't know, at a rough estimate, a gazillion and four shows on the Line Network. There's a Sunday show earlier in the day. You saw Seth Andrews and Forrest Valkai. And if you guys missed it, you can go watch it. It's up, and it's not live anymore, but I mean, it's live to you now. On Monday, Forrest and Jesse Jerdock will be doing Skeptalk at 6 p.m. Great opportunity to talk about more science stuff, evolution, but you can also dig in on conspiracy theorist stuff, cryptid stuff, whatever you're not sufficiently skeptical about. It's a great opportunity to engage on those. Or if you think
Gravity.
skepticism is a bunch of nonsense and you should go with your gut and feel, by all means, call in and explain that to Forrest.
Forrest will love that. I hope the guy that talked about gravity calls Forrest. I hope Jason calls Forrest. There it is.
Yep. Yeah, I can't not do that sometimes. Chewed Gum on Tuesday, addressing the world from a woman's point of view. It started off by, the chewed gum analogy, specifically addressing kind of purity culture and woman's place and value. Once again, it's going to be Alyssa and Arden Hart, like last week, due to some scheduling conflicts. Arden and I just finished watching. We haven't finished watching. We watched. There's a Netflix show called The Circle that Alyssa was on, and we we have watched part of Alyssa's season and are working to get it, but she
that's
just
so cool.
seems awesome. I genuinely, I want to see where Alyssa and I are likely to butt heads, because I have no idea what her personal views are on religious things. It's not, you know, I don't have to have everybody agree with me on everything, but if you're trying to make the world a better place and you're, you know, generally relying on sound scientific information and, you know, exercising skepticism and critical thinking to make sure that we're not polluting the world with more misinformation. I was just pointing out 49% of people in a recent poll not only thought that the S&P was underperforming when it's overperforming, but 49% of Americans polled also thought we were at a 50-year high for unemployment when we are at or near a 50-year low for unemployment. So we live in a world where nearly half of the population, we wonder why are we so evenly divided? I don't know why it's even. It blows my mind, but nearly half of the population think a testable, verifiable fact of reality isn't just a little off, but is the exact opposite of what it is. They thought it was a 50-year high in unemployment when we're at a 50-year low in unemployment. The economy, despite, you know, high interest rate for home loans, is better on most measurable statistics than it has been in ages. And yet it's, oh, the economy. And I get it. We're often worried about how things feel to us. Do I feel like I paid more for food? And yet it's not stopping people from having Uber Eats delivered to them 4 times a week. Maybe that's why the food's more expensive. I know how much Arden and I have saved when we stopped getting deliveries to where it's like once or twice a month at most where we're getting food delivered. But those types of questions, that's some of the stuff that I'm going to be dealing with as we move into the election year. On my Wednesday night show, The Hang Up, this week, David Fitzgerald's joining me, so we're going to dig in on some mythicism stuff and his new book. Transatlantic Call-In shows Thursday with Arden and Josie, and next Sunday, it's going to be Seth and Paulogia at 2 p.m. for the Sunday show, and I'll be back with Aron Ra at 7 for the Sunday show after dark. Are we ready for our final caller who's been waiting on hold for 2 hours and 22 minutes? What an amazing coincidence that it all lined up to be 222 right when it was time to get Kat in here from Alabama. Thank you for your patience, Kat.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
I'm doing all right.
You are an idol of mine. I've been listening to your shows for the past 2 years. I know you're not an idol, but you have been an inspiration for me.
Well, how can I destroy all of that tonight?
I know, right? No, okay, so I have listened to your shows in the hopes of getting an answer to my one final question that's going to make the leap for me from being a true agnostic to a true atheist, okay?
Wow.
And the question has been posed to you, and I've heard you answer it, but you always kind of dismiss it, man. And you always kind of just say, we just go into the ground and we're dead. But I cannot let go of the transitional thought that my body goes into the ground, sure. I want that. You know, I want energy to live on. But I feel that my energy will go elsewhere, and I can't drop it, man.
Okay. I already know what my answer on this is. I don't know what Erika's answer is on this. So I'm going to punt. And if you still want to hear something from me after Erika addresses it, I'll jump in.
Man, Matt, you can't do that to me. Come on, she called because you're her hero.
That's fine.
No.
There you go. Don't pretend like you didn't want this question.
You know I love to talk. I'm a yeah, I mean, my perspective from that on that would be that from a scientific perspective, which is where I like to come from, I really enjoy the empirical. If I think there's nothing wrong with when we don't know something, just saying you don't know. And science is wonderful because it allows us to say we can't be sure, but it's mostly this, right? And I love being able to do that. And from what we understand about the nature of the human body, right, I don't think that there's currently any support that the mind exists as something that is separate from the brain, right? We are what the
I don't
chemicals
think
in our
it's
brain.
connected to the mind, though. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't feel. I know the studies that we've done about, if somebody has brain damage or a different person, all of a sudden they're Christian and they used to be atheist. All that. I don't think it's in the mind I think that there's an essence in all of us, and I can't explain that, okay? I can't explain that. But I think that essence is in a fucking spider, a squirrel, a human. We all are made from the same fucking thing, the earth and the sun, and, the atmosphere itself and everywhere else.
Can you just move the phone slightly farther away from your mouth? You're like overdriving the mic,
I'm
and
sorry.
there's a little rattle thing that it just makes it
Yeah,
hard
that's
to
much
understand.
I didn't mean to get excited too. I got kind of excited. Sorry.
Yeah, I
I'm just
mean,
trying to get it so we can hear.
Yeah, I mean, if
I
you want
don't
to talk
think it's a 7 pound thing. Okay, no, I'm not going
Right.
there with that.
So you're not going down just for clarity, you're not going down the traditional role of a soul, but you're having difficulty shaking the
I'm
notion that
not.
but you're having difficulty shaking the notion that there's something that survives. Do you know anything at
Yeah.
all? Do you know anything at all about the qualities or features of that something that survives? And do you think the something survives knows anything about your qualities or features?
I feel like they're connected. Yeah.
That's not even in the
I
ballpark.
feel
that I
like
was
this
asking.
essence knows my physical body, but that there is a certain disconnect once death occurs, and then whatever goes to maybe another universe. I don't know.
What's the point in believing
I just
something if you
can't
don't know
shake
anything about
that
it?
feeling.
Like, now, what's the point in believing something if you don't know anything about it? If it could be anything, all you've said is that you can't shake the feeling that something happens, but you don't know what. And so when I asked you, do you know anything about the qualities of the something, and does it have any awareness that it would be aware of you?
Yes, it definitely has awareness.
Okay, so you're thinking, see, what is it that leaves the body that can have awareness of you?
I don't know.
I don't either. The time to believe it
I
is
don't
when you
either.
demonstrate.
You know what I mean?
The time to believe it
And it's
is
killing
after
me.
it's been. The time to believe it is after it's been demonstrated and after you understand it. If you run around believing things that you can't understand and you suffer, Stevie Wonder wrote that. Superstition.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just
I mean, Kat,
I would hate to think that everything is for naught. I mean, why are we even here then? I mean,
Did you eat a sandwich?
That's another reason why.
Did you eat a meal today?
Yes, and I brush my teeth and all that.
That's not what I was asking.
There's so many arguments about this.
Well, I'm
But
sorry.
I'm
sorry if I bored the fuck out of you so that
mind.
you assumed I was going to ask a question that I wasn't actually going to ask. Kat, you want to do both sides of this discussion by yourself?
No, I do value your opinion.
Why is it that you're the one that's most likely to bust my zen after this entire show? So you ate something today. You're just going to poop it out. Was that a waste?
No, it served a purpose, man. It gave me energy.
You're going to die someday. Does that mean that your life was a waste?
No, because I actually decided that I came up with my purpose in life. I mean, I know you don't think that there's a purpose in life, and I don't really think that there's a purpose in life, but I came up with mine. I figured it out.
But
Okay.
Kat, that's chill, right? Like there doesn't really what believe. I'll say what I think. I don't think there's an objective purpose in life, but we make purpose for ourselves. That sounds like exactly what you've done, which is
Yes,
phenomenal.
exactly. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that.
I mean, is that what it's all about then? I mean,
I find great meaning in that.
I do too, honestly. I mean,
Kat,
I don't know. I guess I guess I can let you guys go. I just, nobody's ever going to be able to answer that question,
and the time to believe it is never, if that's true.
Well, yeah, of course.
Cool.
Well,
Thanks, Kat.
I'm very glad to have reached you finally after 2 years. I've tried a couple times over the years, and I really admire you, Matt. You're awesome.
Well, I'm not awesome. Get over it. Find better heroes. Go for a walk.
No,
Whatever.
really, you got me. You answered a lot of questions that the way you put it, just over the years. Yeah, watching you in the past,
I
you
appreciate
really
being
set a lot of
appreciated.
people straight, including me.
Thank
So
you
I
very much,
appreciate you.
Kat. I genuinely appreciate being appreciated. I'm glad if what I said was useful. But yeah, if we just sit here and talk about how awesome I am, we'd be here till the end of time.
I
So
know,
let's just
right? I know.
leave it at that.
Till the
Thanks
heat
for the
death.
call, Kat.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, on the note of how awesome I am, first of all, the only thing that's awesome here is the fact that Erika and I just did our first show together, and I think it went exceptionally well, and can't wait till we get to do it again.
You know what, Matt? I'm so salty that we didn't get a single evolution question because I was ready to flex
Me
my
too.
chops about that subject. We didn't get anything about primates or human evolution. Nothing. We got
I
a
thought we were going to
gravity
get it when we got
question.
to fine tuning, and then that dipped into this, flat
I
Earth.
know,
It was
but
so wild.
the thing is that like once you get at that point, like if we can't even agree on the shape of the Earth, then it's not worth having the young Earth creationist or evolution conversation if you don't believe gravity is real. To be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think that density is what controls where the sun goes up or down, and we didn't even touch on the fact that up and down are relative. The people, because you and I are thinking about the Earth as an oblate spheroid, and he's thinking of it as
Right.
flat. So there's an
As
actual
a
down,
plane.
but on the actual Earth, what's down here versus what's down in Perth, Australia, are two different vectors entirely. And yet the person in Perth who lets go of their pen and I can let go of my pen at the same time, and they will both fall towards the same center of fucking mass. You have to get rid of the whole Earth to do that.
I honestly too, like out of all of that, I think it was just because it was so out of left field. The not believing that meteors exist and that space is real. I was like, oh wow, like this is some serious flat Earth right here. This is like as far as it gets.
I felt like I was channeling Simon Dan at some point. By the way, Dan,
I know.
come hang out and do a show. I did a podcast with Dan and Conspiracy Cats once. Happy to have either of them on, although they're not as keen on debating as they are as much at debunking. And so it's really good. I'm grateful to them for all the information all the years.
He'll do them every now and again. But
on that note, a huge thank you, first of all, to the lovely and talented Arden Hart, who's down the hall producing this show and many of the other shows, along with Morgan, who, I mean, that's the other producer here on the line. They're both doing stellar work. We're very appreciative of that. Thank you so much, Stephanie Helms, for screening our calls tonight, and to Cookies and Glacia and everybody else that's in chat as our moderators there. You guys did splendid. It's been a fun and easy couple of hours. We should do it again very, very soon. In the meantime, watch for all the other shows on the line. Tune in, call in, spread the word, get callers in. If you've had difficulty discussing things with someone, pawn it off on Forrest. He'll be here tomorrow. He'll talk for 3 hours about pickles if you want him to.
Forrest will go for 8 hours on a single show, and I know that because I've hosted it with him.
I remember, I think your guys' first Skeptalk was like 8 hours or something. It was just,
Oh yeah,
I'm
you
like,
win.
I've done a lot of
And
stuff, but it's rare to do an 8-hour show. Anyway,
Forrest,
patreon.com/call the line. Go check out